this is summoning insight. And what do you know? It's over. The Los Ratones story, for now, is over. They technically even followed through and all done the sort of like sobs. Oh, bye guys, I'm going to miss you. Oh, and then it's at the end of Stand By. Reckless went on to have a successful career as a streamer. Fucking, we're all doing that thing where what we're pretending is it's totally over, it's all gone. Obviously, watch this space, as has seen by the discussions over the last few weeks. No one really knows yet. Will Riot find some sort of a solution? My goodness, whose music is that? Is that Kado's music? Maybe somehow they will be in a future split, a future tournament, whatever it could be. Who knows what that is? I mean, an obvious angle I even thought of the other day that no one else has even bothered bringing up is, why not just actually go back to 2 splits and then claim that the third split, what would have been versus this time, isn't like an official split. It's like an open section. And then you can just do tournaments with Los Ratones in. That's another way to sort of like thread the needle on the impossible. How do they get a franchise without being in it? But here's where we're going to start. This will probably be even be the title of the video. I'm going to be what people might call edgy, because you know what? Why break the habit of a lifetime? I'm actually going to say what no one else will, because everyone else is saying the thing that's popular to just be liked. I don't think actually Los Ratones did deserve to be in the playoffs of the LEC. I'd actually like to, if you want to go back and forth with us, I can either state that case. We can go back and forth, right? So I'm going to guess. Try, like one thing I actually tried to do, makes me quite unique in esports, is I actually tried to listen to other people's arguments before I tell them they're wrong. I even do things like I try and think through, is there actually a logic to what they're saying? Maybe actually, for example, they didn't even make their case that well. It's called steel manning. You try and think, could you have made their case better? So what's funny is I myself actually was way ahead of most people on the angle that's now been set up for why people would say Los Ratones does deserve the playoffs. And it goes like this. Because early in the split, we all thought, based on last year and them keeping the same rosters, that the best teams would be MKOI and G2. And obviously, they were able to defeat those teams. Then there was even the thing where like KC got good and they almost beat them on week 1. So what that gave you was sort of the moral victory sense of like, well, they are beating the absolute best teams, actually. Even if it's best of one, all that to one side, they've done that. And as I pointed out to you, actually, a long time ago, Nymaera, it's why it's hilarious. Now people are going to claim that I'm like defending this format. No, I told you that format fucking sucks, that tiebreaker format, because it does the thing I hate about tiebreakers, which is one, you don't play a tiebreaker. That's by the way, when you play the tiebreaker, nobody can bitch after that. If Los Ratones then go, we should still be it. Well, you lost the tiebreakers. You didn't. But they didn't play a tiebreaker. What they did is they used a tiebreaker that used essentially data from other matches you've played. And the reason why this one does suck, and I said this something like 2 weeks into the bloody split, is because of exactly this scenario. Even though, this is what I'll now make the point of, even though now G2 and MKOI aren't the best teams in the LEC, actually. So actually, that's somewhat of not as powerful a point as it was at the end of week 2. I get that, you see what I'm doing? See, that's all legit. Yeah. But I will say, if there had been a world where MKOI in particular was in a very good position at one point in time to be the number 1 team, if they'd have gone on to be the number 1 team, it would then, I think, feel very unfair if you're Los Ratones. You beat MKOI, they're totally through and fine in this scenario. It didn't end up really happening. They actually leveled out as they wanted anyway. Then that would feel like, wait a minute, but then I go and I look at, a Fnatic, and I go, you're not beating anyone good. What's this? What is this? Not you even lost to G2 again. That would feel really unfair. But if you notice, that's how seeded it there. That's not actually quite how it happened. Like, people have to do this thing. You have to, if you're going to be an analyst. You have to ask yourself, what is the framing? Are we talking about the best right now, or the best like overall or on paper? Because people do this with pro players all the time, mate. I'll give you an example. It's classic in sports. I'll use a sporting example. You pick a really good up-and-coming player now, and you go, he's better than, and you name a legendary player. Now, what will immediately happen is every kid who never saw the legendary player will understand you mean right now. And you go, yeah, this guy's awesome. And everyone who's an old school person will go, you fucking idiot. He hasn't done it, and then list the whole person's career, which obviously that young player could never have done yet. So in that scenario, you have to ask, so if we're saying who are the best teams right now, I'm serious. Go and have a look. Everyone who tells me it's so obvious that Los Ratones deserve the playoffs, go and look up their record in the LEC. I'll quickly read out to you. Remember, they won 5 out of the 6 games in the end. So still a losing record. And to be fair, there's only one team where 5 or 6 went through, and it's Fnatic. So we'll just read it out really quickly. Los Ratones lost to Fnatic. That was obviously the team in the head-to-head. That was part of the problem. They beat G2. Sounds awesome. But G2 only came 6-5, unfortunately. And by the way, that wasn't even actually, we'll get to this later, but it wasn't even what we all thought. It wasn't like, they're just actually sort of chilling or fucking around. Actually, they've just struggled from beginning to end of this entire LEC Versus. Some would even say they barely scraped through themselves. Then you've got, they lost to Giant X. Giant X actually, even though they're also 6-5, I'd say they had a more impressive 6-5 than G2. Actually looked pretty good. So you lost to them. You lost to KC. Now, I will say, you did have a moment you were leading in that game. But you know what? As the old saying goes, if wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. But they aren't, though. So that's really irrelevant, isn't it? At the end of the day, you have to be able to close a game. It is. It's a banger, in it. It's a bit of old wisdom from the old, the old women's wives' tales type shit. Here's also, by the way, why you can't do the whole, but they could have beaten KC Thorin. Well, then by that logic, you must acknowledge that Shifters should have beaten
yes,
Los Ratones.
There are so many close games that you can't do that. And also,
no.
This is the nature of playing a best of one. You wanted upsets.
Absolutely.
You get your upsets.
Yeah. Because I do think, look, I won't blame only Nemesis for this. It's actually a sickness of pro players, unfortunately. Pro players in every game think every lucky moment they get is like, God fucking put his finger on the scale.
The harder I work, the luckier I get. Yeah.
But then every time they get unlucky, this is an injustice. What is it? Like, I'll give you the example. In Counter-Strike, the best players of all time, mate, would be whining at me when they lost a final. And they'd be like, oh, did you see that when I snuck up behind him and I missed? And I'd be like, yeah, but earlier in the game, didn't you hit like a fluke deagle shot halfway across the map? They were like, well, yeah, but these things happen, It's like, oh, fuck off, mate. Like, look, again, which is it? Are we in a bar complaining? If you're my mate, yeah, go all day long, mate. Well, it's bullshit, innit? Yeah, anyway, you ordered another one. Like, but if I'm doing like a real analysis, it's like we have to take the rough with the smooth, as we say. That evens out. So in the same way as you got that crazy win over fucking Shifters that shouldn't have happened. Well, you know what? Also, Fnatic got a crazy win over you at the beginning of the split, if you remember, where they were like throwing away all those ults and fucking up every skirmish, but you still won. So okay, I'll keep going. Then you go to KC Blue. You lost to them. By the way, KC Blue won 2 games out of 11. So if we're going to say, if I'm going to give you props for beating MCOY and G2, I have to take fucking points away from losing to KC Blue. KC Blue is fucking appalling. Like, I'm sorry. What was the other team KC Blue even beat? What was the other one?
GX in the last week. They beat
GX at the end when basically GX was all but fine. Exactly. So
that's a massive Baron throw.
That's a point against you. That's a point against you. Then we keep going. You beat MCOY. Congrats. You lost to Na'Vi. Now, by the way, Na'Vi did end up being excellent. That's fine. But the point is, you're not beating the actual top teams at the moment. Then you had the win against Shifters. That was, by the way, nightmarishly close. Again, just said it, but we'll take both sides. Notice I'm being fair. I mean, then we go to you beat SK. Yep. That's an all right win. By the way, it doesn't really look that great because at the end of the split, they were kind of shit anyway, and they have obviously shit the bed. So you don't get massive props for that one. You beat Heretics. That's actually not that bad a win. I actually do think Heretics, look, they maybe overperformed at the very end because they got like the fluke wins, etc. But they ended up being not a bad team. Still, I don't think anyone on paper thought they were good.
At the time they beat them, they weren't looking great. No. So I think, but now looking back in retrospect, obviously they went 6-5 as well.
And people would also say that was certainly a game of throws also. There was some of that going on there.
And that would be accurate.
Yeah. And then at the end, you lost to Vitality, who now is tied for second place. I'm sorry, until the very last week of LEC, people all told me Vitality was like shit, the roster's failed. People even predicted on this show.
I'm just not buying the Razor Cake. I'm not buying the Razor Cake. I don't care that it's happened. This team can still not get me to trust them.
And then I'll just throw this in there. Then when you did have the wins over MCOY and G2, that looks, I'm sorry, like that wasn't them doing their more serious draft. Yes, they lost, so absolutely make fun of them, say stupid move, bad coaching. But that looked to me like they actually thought like they were going to make some stupid, make an example of these guys and do some like, you're noob stomping shit. It actually reminds me of the story I've told a million times about what happens in the Korean boot camps when you go there, which is that if they're really some T1 level team and you're like, MCOY or someone they don't respect, they give you the first set of scrims, but then if they like stomp you in 2 normal games, mate, that third game in the BO5 is going to be some like making a turbo nightmare draft for themselves, because then when they beat you, how can you even say we need more scrims? They're like, these scrims are worth nothing against you. And in fact, I almost think the Korean kids want to get you the fuck out there so their coach doesn't make you play them even more. They just think, you know what, we have to just smash these noobs completely, get them out there, then they'll have to get us like a real team. You can't keep giving us these joke Westerners. So all I'm saying is when you actually put it all together, I don't even think I was particularly unfair there. You can take you know what? Yeah, there were a couple of games you absolutely could have beaten Carmine Corp. That wasn't impossible. You could have beaten Fnatic. There's 2 wins right there. Then I'll just throw this out there. One last thing to say, which is if I was gonna, as a Los Ratones member, feel bad about this situation, I'm sorry, I'm not a loser. So what I like to do is look at what was within my power, not what is out of my power. So you know what? In that game, which don't worry, we will definitely talk about, the game that Carmine Corp lost, which then had the stupid pantomime theatrics, which almost play into the idea it could have been match fixing, whether it was or not. That certainly sucks, right? If you're watching it and your life's in their hands. But here's my problem. Why was your life in their hands? Because I remember a game, you probably remember it, Nymaera, where they were playing that aforementioned Vitality. And you know what? It was going great. The game looked fucking great. And then Nemesis, oh, wait a minute. Second best mid of all time after Caps. He decided, you know what? Why don't I go balls deep on this fucking Yuri? And in he went, and he had 2 or 3 chances to get the fuck out of there, but he still, whatever it was, he'd back in over in the tower aggro. Mate, that is the moment. Listen, I don't want you to be haunted forever, but if I was Nemesis himself, I would just be thinking, if I don't do that, if I don't do that, don't we sort of get it just off our own? It didn't matter what KC does, doesn't matter what we do. We'd just be in if I just played that properly, right? It's kind of true.
So, actually, sorry, it wasn't Nemesis. It was Crowny who said he'd be haunted forever by that death mid lane. I thought, I knew one of the players was.
Right.
That loss in particular is so galling because I think you can boil that game down into about 3 parts, and they're kind of 3 different ints by different, or mistakes, some of them are very egregious, by 3 different players. The first one was Crowny getting caught mid, that led to the Baron. The second one was Baus kind of just not frontlining well when Humanoid sweeps into the team, and that again just like completely stalls out of the game. And then the third one's Nemesis going over the wall and then trying to dodge. I think he's trying to reaction dodge a Varusol, and he's under the turret. He eases Yone, which means you're gonna go back under the turret, and then that leads to the whole situation which ends the game. So it's 3 different people who have typically been actually very good in late game. This has been the late game clutch team, and then everything's in their hands. They're on comfort champions, at least with like Baus Scion. And it looks like it's like very, very good for them. Felia's having his best game of the split, the guy that's probably been losing the most games. I can't think of many more galling ways to lose that when this is the game where everything went right.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have a checklist of things which need to go right, you want Baus on something you can have like a Scion where you can have macro impact and then team fight impact. He didn't have the team fight impact. You want Velia to survive early game, have team fight impact later. He did just that. And then just all of these checklist things go down, and then somehow that's the game you lose in late game. That fucking sucks.
Oh, I mean, again, as I say, I actually think when I run down all the context, but this way, I'm not saying like it was awesome that they didn't make it. I certainly think narratively, I'd rather see them than, for example, Fnatic. I don't think Fnatic's going to do a whole lot. I'll actually be surprised if Fnatic beats anyone in this series. You know, these teams might not even do anything, and they don't have the added novelty factor to them. They don't have the whole like it's Reckless and Nemesis, and oh my goodness, they're in the playoffs. And it is a thing.
You never played pro before, yeah.
Even being in the playoffs, you're allowed to do that silly narrative, which wouldn't have happened, but of what if they do the miracle run and make it the first time? Look, the point is until they were eliminated, you could still have that crazy delusion in your mind to keep you going. Now that's all done, obviously. In fact, now it just feels like, guess what? It's just LEC again. Now, boys, we're back in the LEC. If anything, good news is we got Shifters and SK who kind of proved to be a bit crap when it mattered. They're out. And so actually, we're just the real teams who are into the LEC playoffs, which is more of, of a normal sports narrative. But yeah, would you have any final conclusions about the Los Ratones scenario? What is it?
So you're absolutely right about the strength of win schedule. I think earlier in the split when they started beating MKOI G2, we're like, oh wow, okay, they're beating top teams. And actually, you look at the ending results. Yeah, MKOI recovered a little bit, but I mean, both those teams were in it until the very end. The thing which I think you can't take away from like the Los Ratones, and it adds to the heartbreak too. For some reason, for the last years, if you were tied over the playoffs margin, whether that was 8th and 9th, or whether that is in this case, well, in this case, it would have been 8th and 9th, you would always play a tiebreaker, regardless of what heads-to-head you had. Now, if there were multiple teams tied, the tiebreakers would determine which order they were in, so maybe you'd have to play 2 matches or 3, or however many teams ended up getting spread across that bracket. And for some reason, this is the year where they don't have the tiebreakers. And yeah, I think that particularly sucks, because if you had played a tiebreaker between Fnatic and Los Ratones on the form they were, even on that day, Fnatic would have got their asses kicked because they look really quite bad. Sure. And to the point where Vladdy was like, we played like shit, and I don't feel like we deserve it. And that's quite telling too. Of course, you'll be saying that partly for playing up to the social media and whatever to a certain extent, because at the end of the day, people are going to be firing so many messages at the Fnatic players who just happen to be the beneficiaries of Los Ratones
Which is rich, isn't it? The same people who went, you can't blame Cagel because the LECs let them in. Well, then how can you blame Fnatic for just actually getting in on the tiebreaker? They didn't design the rules, guys. They're just a benefactor.
Oh, and by the way, with that, and we'll, I mean, this is a very different case to say, you know, the tiebreaker stuff, which has gone in NA with the seeding thing, because I think tiebreakers are a big thing, because you can, well, what is the worst situation for us? I mean, in the case of LCS, at least you know whether they're in or out based on these things, and it's tiebreaking between seeds, so at least you're still in playoffs, they still have the double elimination. This is actually a tiebreaker to get into or out of playoffs, which LEC had an ironclad rule before. Doesn't matter what the heads-to-heads are. Your seeding might be different in the tiebreakers, but you'll always play one if it is the determination between playoffs and not. And from as far as I can tell, the only reason why they wouldn't do that is because if you're playing, well, they were already playing 6 games a day, right? I think it was 6 games a day on the very last day as well. Yeah, it was 6 games a day. So if you start at 5 o'clock and the games go long and you count in, an hour a game, if you added on tiebreaker scenarios, you would go past midnight, so you wouldn't be able to play the tiebreaker games on the same day. So what that means is basically they wouldn't want an extra broadcast day. I seem to remember, was it last year? There was a tiebreaker scenario where they had to play tiebreaker games on a separate day. I think it was the Heretics one, but they had to play a best of 3, which didn't get them to playoffs. Was it something like that? Where they played it on a Tuesday, which they wouldn't normally open the studio for, which meant that they had no analyst desk. They just had to have caster desk because they didn't, organizing it on short notice, and then also budgeting for that as well affected the way that things go would have happened internally. I would imagine the reason why tiebreakers are not being played this year is because of situations like that beforehand, where games were played on a separate day, meaning you have to open a studio, you have to pay casters or day rates, or you just have a very stripped down broadcast, which of course doesn't look great on you either. And for those of you that don't know, opening up a studio does take like tens of thousands of euros to do. If you're keeping a full building open with studio lights, particularly if you're doing a full production, that's studio lights, that's people for catering, that's people for hospitality if there's fans there. Of course, in the case of this, I don't think they had fans the last time that they were there, when they had the last minute thing through. So you can actually understand pragmatically, yeah, we don't really want to spend a crazy amount for that. However, then the backlash of that is, sadly, just the pure happenstance that the team that ends up losing out from this is probably the one which would have made you all of your money back if they had gone into that tiebreaker and won. Of course, in this situation too, because they were tied with shifters, it would have been a 2 tiebreaker thing, right? If it was all on the 5 and 6 teams, so you would have been Los Ratones shifters, and then the winner of that would face on to Fnatic. I mean, I still think those games should have happened. I'm just very surprised that this year of all years, they got rid of that tiebreaker rule, and I'm presuming it's because of trying to save on the budget of an extra show day.
Another reason I'll throw out there is, actually, if you'd have asked me at the very beginning, I think we might have even talked about this on the first or second episode about this split. I also think, if anything, BO1 actually plays to the favour of Los Ratones. There's no fearless component. By the way, do I even need to say it? Velia and Baus would have been died a million deaths in a fucking fearless BO3 series. That would be nightmare fuel for them. Especially, by the way, a few weeks in, when teams figure out their pool, you would get so many cynical bans from the good teams once you'd won a couple of games. And then also, I'll just throw this out there, I actually do think as well that having BO1s and the fact that you only play each team once, you can argue that actually plays to Los Ratones' favour, in the sense that they have the same 5-man lineup, whereas, for example, some of the teams they were playing were totally new rosters, or 2 or 3 players different. In theory, in the first game when you play someone, that's going to be your best chance to get going in that regard. So I don't know. My problem is this: if they'd have made it, I would have never said you shouldn't be in all that. But no, all right, it's fine. But to me, you had many different ways you could have made it in, and in the end, yes, you got screwed by a bad tiebreaker format. I would change that anyway, in the same way as I would change the system in the LCK Cup, and there's a bunch of things I would change. But at the end of the day, put it this way, I'll just put this out there. If it hadn't have been Los Ratones screwed by the tiebreaker, and in fact this tiebreaker had benefited them, everyone would have been shut the fuck up, it's the rules, blah, blah, blah. So just, you got, as someone who's seen enough of history, like an Ent from Lord of the Rings, I don't get too sort of caught up in this one, mate. I think it would have been cool for the narrative. I also, by the way, if I'm a true hater, surely I should want them in the playoffs so they get dunked on in a whole series. Wouldn't that be better? Their punishment must be more severe, etc., etc. But I think actually in the end, it wasn't that crazy an injustice they didn't make it.
I mean, it's just the case for me that I feel like we would be seeing better League of Legends with Los Ratones in than Fnatic, because I think Fnatic look really bad. I think they look really bad. They started better, and they look really not good. So in a case where it's like, oh god, one of it's just like I kind of wanted to just see how far the momentum would take Los Ratones and actually what would happen with it. I want to see what would happen with the viewership.
Sure.
And yeah, I it just feels quite unsatisfying to not end in a tiebreaker given just the history of Europe going towards them before. So the change in the format for that, again, while I understand from kind of like a broadcast sense and trying to organize it, I do understand it from that. It is also just very painful, I would imagine, for Riot right now that their decision to remove it this year is the most. This would have been the most important tiebreaker. This actually could be like the most important tiebreaker of like all Europe for viewership. I mean, there were some pretty big ones before. Wasn't there a team? Didn't MKOI go from tiebreaker to winning a split? Wasn't that something they did? So we've had important tiebreakers before. And imagine if we didn't have that. Pretty sure we had that from MKOI getting tiebreaker to finals, right, and then winning. That like
I think it was a small bracket.
Yeah, or something like
small
that.
Bracket, yeah.
Yeah, I seen, but there was a team like 1 or 2 years ago that did go through like a tiebreaker, and then because everyone was tied down there, and they ended up making it very far in. So yeah, I just feel like we would have seen better League of Legends, and I think that Riot are probably kicking themselves now.
Also, if we're going to talk about wins and losses, I'll just say this. I agree. Eye test-wise, Fnatic has never looked good the entire fucking split. Like, there's a reason why, even though I fucking love me some upset, you haven't heard me pick up the team. I've just picked up upset alone, right? But at the same time, if I read off the wins that Fnatic has, they beat GX, they beat Los Ratones themselves, they beat Na'Vi, they beat Vitality. By the way, these are some of the best teams in the league, so... At the end of the day, they did get... this is one thing people don't seem to appreciate. I don't know if everyone out there is secretly Pep Guardiola, where his whole thing's that you have to have possession of the ball. You do realise in a football game, it's whoever scores the most goals, mate. You can look and go, look, they had less shots, so they didn't protect. Yeah, but the problem is, at the end of the day, you don't get a medal for having more possession and more shots. You win if you get more goals. That's just, I'm sorry, the way the game works. That's absolutely the way it works. And yes, there are teams that are fucking smooth criminals who just steal every game. And there are teams who are fucking amazing and they just heartbreakingly lose when they're in a winning position. Like, that's the nature of sports, isn't it?
I think it was I was just thinking about the tiebreak thing, so it was really on my brain. That I think it was Mad Lions 23 Spring. They ended up tiebreaking in, and they ended up winning. That was the finals against BDS, the 5-game series. Remember that? So that was one time where that tiebreaker really came in through. So I don't. Yeah, I'm surprised that there wasn't more of a.
Oh, right. Yeah, I see what you mean. You meant in the BO1 part of it. Yeah, I was thinking.
Yeah, sorry.
Three groups. I was confused. No, I get what you mean. Right? The BO1 part. Right.
Yes, that was back in 23. Okay. But there was definitely in my mind that some team had tie-broken through and gone on a big run. Not that I'm saying that Los Ratones would have done.
No, but it's impossible now.
Yeah. I'm just like, realistically, this is because a lot of the time people get really annoyed at certain formats where teams which seem to be performing very well at the end of the split don't get that chance to prove it in terms of on the day, end of the split, who's better, who's grown the most in the split to do through that. Because we had that with, well, obviously Mad Lions, another example for them. They went international without winning best of fives. So they've done better in previous spots like that before. So typically fans, and I tend to prefer this too, if there's a way to tie-break teams, not just on head-to-head or blah, 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 if they're equal on game score and series score, I feel like you should play a tiebreaker if they are tied, just because realistically, one of the biggest draws to any game is just quality of gameplay. I mean, I know some people are like, oh, we want to follow the stories, these players, X, Y, Z. Better gameplay tends to bring better experiences for that. So if Fnatic now bomb out of playoffs, which I'm going to imagine they will, you would have really wanted that tiebreaker.
Sure. Okay, well, what we can do is we will pivot, and being as two of the teams I just mentioned, Vitality and MKOI, what's funny is Vitality, if you go, MKOI, if you went back to like week 2, they were looking like maybe they were even secretly the best team, because I'm sorry, most people wanted to wait a while to see Karmine Corp with a bit more sample size, and G2 was shitting the bed at the outset, so even if people did the Corpium, they'll probably still ride it into the playoffs, and like G2 will get it together, don't worry, the drafting will be better, let them get to the VO5s, all the usual jazz. If you actually look, MKOI at one point was looking very good. Meanwhile, Vitality has just said, basically almost until the end of the split, most people were like, is this team even any good? Won't they just sneak in one of the last playoff spots? In the end, they've actually done pretty well, and they've sort of won some big games on the way out. So these two teams are going to play each other. And I thought to myself, first of all, what a banger matchup to do. Like, what's funny is I think people still on paper think MKOI's better. MKOI with the 6-5 team, Vitality was the 7-4 team. And even better, we actually have Polymarket that we can use to test what people think, because on the Polymarket for this matchup, it will take place on the 16th of February, which is Monday next week. In this match, we have MCOY is currently favoured by the traders on Polymarket. They are 58% and Vitality is 43%. So it is something of a pick-em series, but actually they're favouring MCOY for this one, even though, as I said, the record of MCOY technically was worse. So what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Well, Vitality just beat MCOY in the last week too, in the best of one. So we have seen a bit of a head-to-head. That was a very interesting game where Linsus got that really good early gank, which kind of destabilized things for MCOY. Best of 3. Vitality are a very volatile team. And this is what, joking about it earlier, I consider them the EU Razor Cake now. I mean, obviously now Rogue is far gone with the Razor Cake analogy. Vitality are a team which has been, they have been ramping up. I think that they're probably the most ambitious drafting team in Europe. I'm not going to say best, but they're most ambitious one. They've given over power picks, like lots of power picks before, and ended up dealing with them quite well. Even though they're working in best of ones, they've ended up picking some pretty freaky drafts as well. I mean, most people aren't going to pick something like a Zoe, right? And they ended up picking that versus Vitality to win that against the Rise, which is just not something which other people are playing that, especially not in like game 1 of a best of. I think this team has the upper ceiling to beat MCOY. It's just, now it's the question, do I think they can do it twice in a series? And also with MCOY, I think starting to ramp up, I think that MCOY, I consider them quite arrogant in this regular season. I thought that they were, I thought honestly they were asleep at the wheel. I think that they were getting away by just being more cohesive. They had the same 5-man roster. But even then, Super and Jojo were really, really off form. And I thought they were getting caught in some just despicable moments in the game and throwing games which were completely won. So we have to judge things like, okay, it's getting into best of play. They get some time to sit, to prep against a specific opponent rather than 2 teams in a weekend or 3 teams in a weekend when they were playing 3 games on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And also another thing which kind of goes into it for me is both Humanoid and JoJo have typically been people who get playoffs buffs. Both of them do much better in playoffs. Now, we haven't talked about that for JoJo, for Humanoid for a while, because the Fnatic years haven't been great. But even then, the Fnatic years, he was better in playoffs. And I think that now it seems, because he was talking about basically, look, his mental health was in the gutter on Fnatic, and that is done a lot better now. This year, being on Vitality, back with Kazi, he seems a lot happier as well. He also seems like he's playing better with that in mind too. We could actually have a really high-level mid lane matchup for this. I still don't know if I can bring myself to trust Vitality. That ambitious drafting does sometimes just get them completely slaughtered in draft 2. And there are some games where I'm like, you're clearly a better team, but you've also given like a team. They gave SK like Jace, Nymaera, Alistar, Ambassador, which I just consider just incredibly strong champions right now. And obviously it was SK, so they won that game. SK weren't a good team. But I'm sat there like any other team would have just ran you through with that. And you can get away with that, for one best of one versus, a team, one best of one versus a team or whatever. But now it's into the best of 3s and you get one game like that in that series. I don't know if that'll see you through it. I don't know if I can bring myself to support, to trust Vitality. I'm just not sure that consistency is there. Do they have the ceiling? Absolutely. I just don't think that the consistency is there for me to think they'll get it over the line. I think MCOY will turn up into playoffs form. I think they'll start shaking off the rust. I think JoJo will get his own playoffs buff. And if Alvaro turns up as well, I think this is going to be a bit of a support diff too, because Flashy has been better, but I still think he's one of the weakest supports.
I actually agree with the market. I agree that's actually roughly where I would have it. So essentially, if I was buying into this market, I would buy MCOY with the one that I would get in at 59 cents. Now, the reason why is a bit like what you're saying there. I actually do think in individual games, Vitality does look like the ceiling can be quite high. I mean, they have some pretty fucking skilled players. Even in that clip I actually explained before where Nemesis sort of hints under the tower, it also took like Humanoid doing some fucking like mechanical wizardry too. Like he was pretty good. So there was some of that. Like I could tell Velian and Nemesis thought they had him caught, they didn't. Now, so the problem is Vitality has like the tease, the sweat that you could go into it believing they could do it. But I'm with you. The problem is because they have to do it 2 out of 3 times. You could certainly, I think MCOY is a very scrappy team. They're very rarely actually clean for me. But actually, if anything, one of the reasons I think they thrive in the LEC, but not internationally, is the LEC's tons of scrappy fights and skirmishes like that, mate. If anything, this is their element. Like, I actually do think, unless they were playing the superior G2, they looked all last year like they could mix it up with any team they played against. So the problem is, in those sorts of games, I will favour that MCOY gets through all that. I could see this being a really close 2-1, though. I think it actually has a potential to be an excellent game to watch. Maybe not like high-level macro League of Legends, but if you want an exciting LPL-esque game, this looks like it could be good.
It's funny you mentioned that, actually, because like I've chatted with Mac and Pat over the years, and there was a point start of last year, I think it was, where Mac and I can't remember who I was talking to. It might have been Pat, who's now the head coach. Max moved on to kind of like basically being a coach of coaches in Vitality. But basically, they were saying in previous years on Vitality, when they were there, they had tried to emulate more LCK clean setup around objectives, kind of like very rigorous regimented macro style, and that hadn't worked for them. And they were trying to move towards more scrappy, frenetic skirmishing playstyle, such as LPL teams. So they actually have somewhat leaned into that too. And I think yeah, MKOI really benefited last year when the meta seems to be about very aggressive jungle support movements, particularly because, look, LER is the best player in MKOI. That guy's playing so well right now. I think the jungle match has been really interesting in this game too, because Lince's got a leg over him in that last game, which I think a lot of people have been dunking on Linces, and I think, part of it's fair, but I think this guy does have a good upper ceiling. He's shown it from time to time. The jungle matchup, now that both of these players actually get a chance to sit down, prep, sit with the coaching staff, and think about what they're going to do about early game, that's going to be really crucial. Because if that early gank didn't happen versus MKOI, and MKOI actually get towards a stable platform, I do wonder how different that game would have gone, and whether that would have been a more accurate representation of what we'd expect a best of to go between them.
And for me, if you want to believe in Vitality and think they can do it, because obviously the price is pretty good if you want to buy in, I would say the biggest angle, like I think the biggest mismatch is, mate, as of right now, Nako probably is a better top laner. This guy is, like, put it this way, he showed glimpses of it last year, but it was a very flawed roster. The guy actually does look like he's a stud, mate. I do think one day this player will be like, if this team itself doesn't get there, this player might be on G2 in a few years. Like, he actually looks like the skill level is there, and it looks like the rest of the league respect him too. His picks are legit as fuck too.
Yeah, no, Nako is like this guy. I mean, I think Kire put it best on another show a while ago, where it's like Nocno is that kind of guy where, particularly at this point in his career, he's allowed to just figure out his limits too, and he's allowed to lose you a game. Actually, he is, because he's more likely to win you a game than lose you a game when he's given that kind of free reign. I mean, yeah, we saw him even versus Los Ratones be like, well, fuck it, everyone else has banned Sion versus Los Ratones. I'm not going to, because I have an answer into it. And personally, I think that's a good strategically. I think that should be something you do. By the way, if it is obvious that someone is going to pick a champion, you have a very extended run-up time to prepare something for it. He prepared the Mundo for it. Did it work out perfectly? Not all of it, but in the team fights, you saw him blocking out, the Sion ult, which then stopped a lot of Bowser's team fight impact, which really expected him to have. So yeah, I think that Nako, particularly now that Mirwin is picking less of the crazy shit, Mirwin doesn't seem like he's the mad scientist as much anymore. Nako is now that guy in Europe, and I know that Mirwin can still pull out some stuff, right, for sure. But I think that Nako on current form will be a bit of a hindrance to Mirwin, even though we expect Mirwin to be leveling up throughout the year. He does have Alfaro as that positional coach, and we'll see what impact that has done. I was quite surprised that G2 let him go, because he was helping out Broken Blade. Can't remember when, whether that was 24. I think that was 24 when BB was playing a lot. Yeah,
it was last year. It was
last
last
year.
year.
That's the one.
Yeah, that's the weirdest part. That's the same thing I said.
Yeah.
Mate. Not only one, why not just sign him anyway? Because Broken Blade's had historical champion pull issues sometimes. And then two, you've now given a coach to another team that might help them. That's the weirdest part about it, isn't it?
Unless they thought, well, we've gotten the use out of this, and like, or obviously, we don't have a good opinion of him. Well, why would you keep him for a full year then, right? But as far as I remember, he was helping Broken Blade figure out Zac top lane matchups.
It was literally one of the splits where he had a bunch of new champions for real.
Yeah, it was the Zac
his laning looked way better.
Yeah, and then obviously BB's now turning up now and picking stuff like the Lee Sin top into Rumble, and Canna. We heard the team comms, or someone said in an interview where someone's like, "Oh, Lee Sin, is it going to be fine?" It's like, it's not a problem, and then just solo kills him in lane. So that says a lot, right? Where BB's understanding of matchups is clearly not what it was, and we have and that's actually being a big detriment to the team. Whereas you look at players like Nako and Mirwin, I'm like, okay, I actually trust these guys if they have the resources and the setup time to prepare matchups. Those are the kind of guys which I really think will run away with the top lane matchup. So in a lot of ways, this is a kind of like for like matchup, which does make a lot of sense. A lot of the Team Vitality guys have links to MKOI. A lot of the staff on Vitality came from MKOI as well. And of course, you had Humanoid and Kazi that were there back on Mad Lions back in the day. So it doesn't surprise me that, Mac and Pad were on MKOI, a lot of the players, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't surprise me that there are some similarities in how these teams play. Of course, you've got, very different players on the Rift too, right? But yeah, I think this one is about as even as it gets between matchups. I think they're both on. I mean, we're expecting MKOI to ramp up, but if they do ramp up, then obviously they're going to be very similar in form, and actually they have similar playstyles too. So this one really is a knife edge fight.
Right, there is another detail related to the Los Ratones story, but I've divided it because I actually don't think it's that much about Los Ratones, right? And it is, like, by the way, as an aside, one thing I didn't even bother with, even though we were throwing topics in, is the thing where Cadrill's basically just sat in silence, like, staring off like a guy who's taken it 10,000 LSD hits and wonders if he's ever going to come back to sanity again. I totally get that. That's the conflict of interest I talked about. That's someone who's the fucking owner of the team watching his team's chances fade away in front of him, as opposed to the guy who's the co-streamer. It's a bit hard to get hyped up and be like, guys, haha, look, what's going to happen next? And are they going to... Yeah, I get that, right? But here's the one part I do think is mental. Right, this is where if you are Kameto, someone else who has a conflict of interest, he is simultaneously a team owner and he is someone who's an entertainer and he's also simultaneously the core streamer, which is sort of a bit like doing commentary / analysis. So he's throwing all these hats at once. And unfortunately, the main hat he appeared to wear in this particular scenario where his team was playing Heretics was a clown hat. Because, bro, this is one of those examples where, as a pure entertainer, this is hilarious. What he did was, when the Heretics team was winning, which was obviously massive to make sure that the tiebreaker scenario would be problematic for Los Ratones, instead of just being like either, if you had the team owner hat on, you do the poker face. Oh, this is such a shame. I can't believe my guys are losing. Because he was in the entertainer mode, and I imagine also, let's be real, he probably had some crazy Schadenfreude going on, because he's almost watching like, I can't believe this is basically my problem is about to get taken care of, even though, yes, it needs my team to lose. Like, the problem with that is I would imagine, and I don't particularly even like this guy, as people know, but I don't personally think he had the match fixed. I also think it would be the most insane double bluff to match fix it, but then also openly laugh about it in a way which makes people call into question, is there a conflict of interest / an integrity issue here where you're match fixing it? Like, I feel like if you were going to match fix it, you'd do a better job of selling the idea that, like, this isn't what I expected. What's going on? What the hell? We're supposed to be the best. I'm going to really talk to you. Instead, what he did was he did like almost porn level acting of like, oh no. And like, listen, mate, I've seen Kameto stream before. He doesn't do it like that. That was so fake. It's like, I'll give you an example, Nymaera, of where you can tell the difference between goated actors and just average like TV actors. If you ever see a scene where they have to eat food, holy shit, are bad actors bad at that. You know, they're getting like 1p on a fork and... You know, like it's like there's some it's pantomime, mate. Whereas like a goated actor, if you ever pay attention, they don't even put food in their mouth. You know what I mean? But you never notice it because they've like mastered all the subtle movements. They're not trying to overact it, you know.
I actually have a league relevant one for this. Oh my god! In fact, I've got some of them on my shelf over there. So, LPL is sponsored by an energy drink, and this year they added in a new advert, and it does send me every time. It's called Warhorse, and they have an interview, but it's a Warhorse interview where they talk with the player, and at the end of it, they go, look, and then they hold the can right into the camera like that. It's just like, okay, this is well over the top, but you're just sat there like, you can see some of the players just like, they're absolutely not swallowing that. Every day, if you watch before each series, before it, they have like the pre-series interviews. They have this like, oh, drinks, so the logo's showing to the camera, show it afterwards. Like they really, that is just beyond pantomime. And of course, that one's put on for that, but it's so funny to see how crazy over the top that is.
I'm just glad to see the old FPX coach has managed to branch out in a new business. That's cool. Okay, right. Well done.
Sure.
Whatever. If deep law for people who know that one. By the way, what do you actually think about this topic? Because as I said, look, I'm just going to put my cards on the table. I don't think he actually match fixed the game. I don't think this was some grand conspiracy. Because they also didn't need like a bunch of other things to happen. Like you could, it wasn't, if this was the last game and then it was all in him, you could maybe do it. Yes. But my problem is, I just think that the dumb thing was, while the streamer, that was a very clever thing to do because it incited exactly this discussion. I think as a team owner, it was a really stupid move because I actually think before that,
suspicion.
And their fans are looking for a reason to be mad and feeling like there's injustice. So I feel like you've played into actually quite a dangerous area.
I don't think any of these players or Reaper as a coach would ever buy into that too. Because remember, there's a difference between like the owner who's talking shit and like playing up into the content and then actually the team doing it themselves. It would be the world's dumbest thing to do. Like, so all it takes is one person to just whistleblow. And then it all goes up in flames. And this is a team which is going international, wants to go international again. we know what
you're
happened.
in first place in the league. Why risk anything?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. It would be dumb as heck. So do I think there is actually credibility to the match fixing allegations? No, I really don't. I think it's dumb. However, just making jokes about it and bringing even just a hint of suspicion on it is just not a very wise thing to do, I don't think. Especially when, like, I've talked about this a little bit. I had another podcast where I was talking about this too, where basically a lot of this kind of animosity between Kami and Core and Los Ratones has come from the Kami and Core side, but this is specifically from, not about fan bases, because I understand, like, the Los Ratones fans are going fucking feral now, and actually there's some really unacceptable stuff being said from, like, some of the Rats to some of the Kami and Core fans, and again, that's not acceptable. But in terms of actually what has gone on between the owners of these organizations, Cadrill's just been sat chilling, doing his own thing, and he's streaming, and again, which is why we said on previous episodes, regardless of what your opinion on what's happened with Los Ratones coming into LEC and seems like they've had favorable decisions for them, that doesn't come from Cadrill himself. Whereas you look at kind of some of the reactions from Kameto, and I think partly because of that nature of team owner, entertainer, trying to figure out the balance between them, I think that some of the stuff that's been said about, some of that kind of it's gone beyond kind of like being a rivalry into, like, this seems like it actually seems like bad blood, and that has inspired some of the communication between fan bases, right? Where I think Kameto and like this stuff, like, we talked about it before, the video that was in the LEC studio where they said, oh, we're going to show
Cadrill was getting shown out the door, sure.
Yeah, Cadrill's getting shown out the door, and then they posted it without his permission, even though they filmed him without him knowing, I think it was. So there's stuff like that where you think, okay, there's a background to this in terms of, well, it seems like there is bad blood, or it could easily be construed as that to a casual. And I understand the logical reasons of, look, Kami Core will feel hard done by. We've talked about that a bunch. Don't need to have rehash that again. Yes, it feels pretty shit, but that doesn't mean that you inspire this bad blood yourself. And especially if that has happened, then it does feel like there's tension there. Why would you ever cast suspicion at that point? Why would you ever do that? It just feels very unwise. So do I think there's any water to the allegations or anything to that? No. Do I think it was a good idea to act like he did on stream? I think that could be taken out of context very easily and get him in trouble. So I don't think it was a wise thing to do.
By the way, though, when you tell me, I just like to imagine I'm sat reading a book with a pipe, like some Tolkien-esque figure, and then you just come scurrying over the hill. Knock on, Mr. Thorin, the Kami Corp fans are fighting the Los Ratones fans. Let them fight. And I go back to my book. You know what? I'll turn up in 3 hours. We'll pick off the survivors. That fucking hell, mate. Listen, if there was ever a fan base going head to head, let that one figure itself out. You know what? The jungle will sort this one out. Let that one.
Why would they when Thorin called for aid during the Holy War against TSM?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, actually, that's even an angle that people don't realize. It's not totally true. It just coincidentally did look like this. One time when I was going hard against TSM in the Holy War, that was also when, just because actually at the time they had a good team, I was like bigging up Fnatic a bunch. And I remember Veterans' angle was like, oh, what you're trying to do is like, you're trying to get the Fnatic Legion on your side to combat their team. It's like, look, I wish I was on that Machiavellian level, mate. It actually was just pure happenstance, but it would be a cool angle if it was true. By the way, there was, though, some actual, here's what's sad. The Los Ratones thing of will they, won't they qualify, mixed with the Kami Corp, like, you didn't / is it match fixing? Then all the fucking extra drama that came up on Kami. It actually all hid what I think is way spicier drama.
Yeah.
But this just went under the radar, which was the fucking XBDS shifters drama.
Yeah.
So if people don't remember this detail, right? When Striker in BDS brought 113 in, you have to remember that was his dude from Carmine Corp when they were an LFL team. In fact,
coach,
I can tell you one of the reasons why Striker left Carmine Corp was that he thought that Reckless, as well as like essentially going above his head to the people who owned Carmine Corp and getting to stay in the team, so Striker didn't have the option to remove him. I know one of the players he felt was hard done by was the jungle and the support. It was the fucking 113 guy, and then I can't remember the name, unfortunately, the support guy. I forget his name. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, the point was, so at the time when he came into the LEC, and if you remember when 113 was in the LEC, not the first time with the Strats, the second time when he's in BDS, if you remember, early on, in like if you go back to the winter and the spring, there would be games, by the way. He would like almost carry the game. He was having some like really nice mechanical games. He was really short. But he also was notorious for like throwing games crazy, doing mad mistakes. And I actually think at the time, this was my take on it, because of their past history, I actually thought, oh, right, this must be Striker's boy. He must fucking love this guy. It must be one of those ones you get with managers where you just have a connection with the guy, and you think you're the whisperer, you're the guy who can sort of get to him and get the best out of him and then avoid some of the downside. So I'm shocked that the drama is actually coming from 113 to Striker. So people don't know, 113 on Twitter, once Shifters had been eliminated from playoff contention, he tweeted, "Who could have guessed?" At Striker LOL coach, benching your players for whole weekend scrims before officials, shouting to your players 24/7 in reviews, forcing your players to add LEC players so they leak which champions they play in scrims was not the key for success. So sad. And then like sad face, like sort of straight faced emoji. Bro, this is actually like the implication he's making there is great. He's basically outing Strikers like a terrible coach, essentially. What do you think of this?
Well, you know what's even, did you see the reply to that from Ice? Because like he replies saying, "I did it for you." That's a Korean player saying that too. And yeah, that actually adds water to it for me, because rule of thumb is, if you're gonna start airing dirty laundry like that, it better be pretty egregious, or you better be very clean, because look, there's a lot of stuff which goes on in teams which I don't think it wouldn't be received well publicly. And you can think of that what you will. I mean, I've seen coaches and players deal with things in not great ways. This is across various reasons. I'm not talking about just LEC here, but like obviously things get from like just like, oh, okay, they're not a very good coach, to down to like, okay, that's actually a safeguarding issue. That's when I think you should talk about stuff publicly, as if it's a safeguarding issue. Now, I don't know if this crossed that boundary. Obviously, we've not seen any specifics on it. I would imagine, shouting at players like that, it doesn't sound like anything. Yeah, obviously verbal abuse isn't great. Yeah, the Ice chiming in like that does adds a definite eyebrow raise, because players don't always react well with coaches.
Remember, guys, Ice now is on Heretics, and obviously he was on the BDS team with this guy at the time. So that, like, it's implied, like, whether it's true or not, like that's why I knocked him out or whatever, which is like a cool angle in a way. Something.
Yeah. I think Heretics actually lost to BDS. So I'm not actually sure. I don't actually know exactly what. Unless it was just like Ice leave it. I don't actually know exactly what the context would be of Ice saying it that way then, which is a bit strange. But yeah, the fact that a Korean player, which typically, they have a very different view of authority structures, typically culturally to the West, and Monty's talked about this tons on the show in the past in terms of how coaches hold a very different role within Korean teams to Western teams, where coaches in the West can sometimes be a bit decorative. But yeah, there are some players which really don't work well with certain coaches, or they don't they just don't get along with specific people.
Yeah, by the way, that doesn't make any sense at all. You're right. They obviously Heretics didn't even beat Shifters. So
which is why I'm questioning why would he. I'm like, okay, and unless it's like, oh, I left for you.
That could be, I guess.
Or maybe it's referencing to something that happened between them. Obviously, that would be the reference between them, because they were, they're on the same team for a bit. But I'm like, okay, obviously he's chiming in support. That's the important part. That's the bit that we can see with that. So this isn't a good look for Striker, a player who, as coaches, come under fire before. We've talked about him on the show. We thought, okay, previously we thought, he seems to have gotten teams onto the same page well. The previous roster, the 2023 one, looked pretty good because they played well around objectives. Surely there's some coaching stuff as a part of that too. But, obviously, Sheo ended up leaving that team. I doubt that Sheo and him have a very good relationship. But see, as far as I've seen from various comments on their social media, yeah, apparently Sheo's not, got the best view of him either. Yeah, this is obviously not a great look for him. He's not responded to anything, Striker, but there's other stuff in that tweet in terms of, getting players to add other LEC players to go watch on the client, what champions they're playing. I guess that would mean on Tournament Realm. So you're watching on Tournament Realm to see what they're playing in scrims. Things like that. I would imagine that,
that's not technically legal. It's just a grey area, isn't it?
It's just like, I'm sure that people would be like, come on, man, that's immoral.
Yeah, it's just a little, you're trying to get a tiniest edge out there.
It's like how, that people will sometimes send scouts or people to go watch football training grounds. Sometimes they get someone to watch that. But it's like, is it looked down on? Probably, but end of the day, if you're trying to get a win, you're trying to get a win. I mean, I'm sure you can find some arguments for that. In terms of the actual shouting thing, though, it really does depend on the specifics to a certain extent. Should you be shouting at people? No, especially not regularly, I don't think. But if you come from traditional sports, it's just a thing which some coaches have to do to kind of break their way through into certain players. Actually, I was talking to Yamato about this the other day, where he was saying effectively he's only ever done it like once in his career, and it was intentional. And you have to know your players very well for that too. That seems to check with what I would assume would happen in these kind of environments too. Some players, I'm sure, I mean, Striker's worked with some players who've known to have an ego in the past, like Adam and whatever, where how do you retain authority and get someone to kind of lock in when they've been, if they've been the best player in their friendship group into being the best player in their amateur team into the semi-pro team, and they've just been like a prodigy up and up and up, and then they finally run into a roadblock where they go into tier 1, tier 2 or whatever, and you need to impress on them. They need to listen to someone else's ideas of the game or work in a different environment or whatever. Sometimes you have to forcefully kind of break through that. However, if you do that and get it wrong, you have broken the social contract. As soon as you raise your voice, as soon as you get angry at someone, and it seems like you're, raising the heat in the room like that, you are changing the social contract, and that is a very risky thing to do. It sometimes works. I mean, football managers do this all the time, right? With someone like Alex Ferguson was an absolute hard ass in the dressing room as far as all stories go from him. From what it is sounding like, he obviously misjudged that for some of the players, at least, that he worked with before.
Problem I have with this is it doesn't really mean much because it's one player at the moment saying it. And then again, even if ICE is trying to help, mate, you scoffed even a small English sentence. Like, it doesn't play to the idea that you have great communication. I think my brain can say I did it for you, but even then I'm not 100% sure. So I'll just say that's actually, if anything, you've somehow managed to add more questions than answer with your comments. So I don't even know that that's a corroborating statement. So when I look at the 113 angle, my problem is this. I do get the sense from what I've heard behind the scenes about Striker in Carmine Corp, in BDS, etc. It sounds like he is one of those managers where he isn't just like, I'm the coach. It's like, it's my team. This is my project. I've got all these things. And so that's why, like, basically, when you were listening there, this is where there's no like right or wrong style of management. It depends on who you are and what the project you're running, and crucially, what personnel you recruit. That's why actually it's usually a personnel change that makes a good manager successful, not necessarily a better player. It's more like the guy who fits your style or listens to you or wants to play the way you want them to play. So if I look at the negative side of this, well, I can tell you, one, there's 113 now didn't like it. I as I alluded to before with the Carby Corp conflict, Reckless certainly didn't like the way that Striker behaved. So there's two people who maybe are more on the I don't want to have people shouting end of the equation. At the same time, though, I also give Striker mad props when I consider he worked with these three people and put them on their place. Adam, Crownshot, and Reckless himself. Like, these are people who are quite difficult players to coach potentially, and a lot of other coaches have struggled to find the sort of the right recipe, and some of them have tried catering to them. That can work and it cannot work. Some of them tried going hard against them. Sometimes that's made it completely terrible the other way, or maybe it's temporarily brought them in line. It's always a fine balance when you're doing this sort of coaching. Here's the problem I have with this topic, though, which is that as of right now, look, it looks to me like COS 113 isn't particularly relevant right now. And actually, as I said, this went fairly under the radar. Actually, aside from us, I don't know anyone else that's even talking about this drama. It got superseded by the much bigger things. I do get the sense that if you're Striker, you actually don't even have to address this, mate. You could just leave it. If anything, a few people saw it on this show. Aside from that, it'll be forgotten. It's not like 113's on a team playing in the playoffs or something. That would be a spicier angle. So I also even think, right, if you're 113, I don't know that you accomplish much with this, but you said it earlier. The area I think you're playing with fire is what happens if Striker did just get pissed off and he goes to a journalist? By the way, a little spicy bit of detail. Somehow, I am at all times in Western League of Legends banned or blacklisted by at least one or two orgs, but it's never more than one or two orgs. And it's almost like a roster where when one leaves and the bad person leaves and they go, you can just do stuff now, then another one hops in. So actually, BDS/Shifters is one of the only orgs I am blacklisted for. I would assume, because of going back and forward in Nuke on Twitter where he was being rude to me, so I was rude back to him. I would assume it's that they just don't want me to somehow interact. Like me, by the way, I don't even necessarily think that's a terrible thing, because I'm certainly not trying to be like, I'm just the interview guy. I'm absolutely out there giving my own takes. I've always said it's your prerogative if you want to do the interview or not. And in that case, put it this way, it's not even that silly an idea to just org-wide blacklist. I'll give you an example. I won't say who, but I have had friends in rosters in BDS. I do think it's a bad look if I'm going straight at your star mid laner and then another player does an interview with me. Yeah. Even though you might think, well, let's all be adults. No, that's going to then make Nuke think like, no, it's just guy fucking out of my side. Oh, you're on the, are you telling me, and then you could even get paranoid. Are you telling him stuff about, you don't even want that in the equation, mate. So I don't blame you for that one. So my point here is, though, it couldn't be me, Striker. But if Striker really had, as you say, well, I'm sure, first of all, there's another side to that story. And then secondly, I imagine he's seen 113 do some things too. And if Striker comes out, there's an asymmetry to this relationship 113, which is this. Striker ain't getting fired because of some story where you say he shouted at you. If Striker came out and did things like, actually 113 was worse than he thought, guys. He couldn't play these champions. I had to like band-aid the whole draft. Then he fucked up a pick he promised me he'd be good on. Then he actually started crying when he lost the game, even though if he did, mate, that could actually end your career, mate. You could never be in another top tier. There's people who might hold his word in higher regard than you. And there's always an asymmetry anyway between you're the pro player and he's a coach. That's naturally an authority disparity there. So I agree with you. It's also kind of like a dangerous game. And as I said, if you wanted it to be effective, if you won 1-3, look, this might be a scenario that would never have occurred. But the real best scenario would have been if you were an LEC, and especially if you were like beat him in a game or you played him. You drop the same info then, and that tweet will go viral, man. That will be the gigabagger that will go everywhere. Whereas in this particular case, look, it was a fun thing to talk about for 5-10 minutes, but I'm not sure it goes any further than that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if you're gonna bring it up at all, well, okay, no, like if it's genuinely concerning, and there's, like I said, if it's a safeguarding issue, I think in that case, by the way, if you are a player in a team, and this applies to any level, like obviously it can be very daunting to think about, oh shit, I have to go against an authority figure like this or something, and I can understand that. And I mean, in other regions, and again, like this, I'm making it very clear, it's not LEC because I don't want people to feel like they're done with this. I've heard of like coaches assaulting players in some regions for over years. This has happened in the past. Now, a reminder, folks, that I mean, hell, even Detonation Focus Me in Japan, they had a story back in 2022, where they had their top laner Tol 2, where he effectively left the team and the police had to get involved because of some stuff that the coaches did. I mean, obviously that's the very worst case of examples, but it can often take things getting very bad for players who often feel like they have to go against authority to then come out with stuff like this. So basically, if there is actually a safeguarding issue, make sure you're coming out with information, hopefully to, appropriate sources, reach out to people and for advice, however you can. But yeah, this is the problem. It's like, if this is just, you don't like the coach, because of course we don't have the specifics. We actually can't tell where this lands on it. We can't weigh on this. We're just trying to talk about cryptic tweets from ICE or whatever, because we just don't have the context. But it can go anywhere from, you probably should actually go to someone important about this, to, well, let's be honest, you're probably putting yourself in danger more than anything else here, because what happens if return fire happens?
Now, with that said, I do think, one, this type of drama, he said, she said, with no evidence and no way to know what's going on, and you can't know, what was the relationship? Like, for example, I'd love some backstory. By the way, if you even admitted, like, actually, you know what, he was actually a coach that was, like, on my side for a long time, and he did help me get back in NEC, but then he turned again. That's almost, you even building a better story there. Suddenly, it seems like you've given me a little bit, so it seems that you're not being unreasonable, but then you're also sort of setting the table for why it went so. If you do something like that, it's better. So I do think, in general, this sort of drama fucking stinks. It's not great. And in general, let's clean up the PR, let's clean up our acts, and let's do it all with Mandor, one of the sponsors of this show. Because for Mandor, there's actually one item I always suggest for people. I think it is their best product. It is these. It's just the Mandor body wipes. Because the reason why these are mega is you can easily use them just at your PC. Like, if I had to put it this way, it is right now winter, unsurprisingly. I am in Northern Europe. So I'm not right now using it when I'm doing it again. But I'll give you an example. If during the summer, this apartment gets to the temperatures it can get to, I might actually just use them on air. Look, I won't be taking my whole shirt off. That'll be the special Patreon only stream later. I'll just use them on it, because actually one thing it's really good for is, and I actually tested this out the other way, that's right, I'm doing like science shit like a little kid would do, by the way, which is I waited till I was sweating, then I smelled my own pits. Oh, that stinks. And then I got the Mandor wipe, and then I smelled it. Ooh, there's not any smell anymore. Now, I'm not saying it smelled like fucking, it didn't smell like saffron and the hanging gardens of Babylon, but it did work. It did get rid of the smell. And that's because Mandor, their scientific approach has nailed how you get rid of the smell of body odor. It's not that sweat itself can always be eliminated. That's a natural human function to help you cool down, but it gets rid of the smell. And I can tell you, if you've ever been around a bunch of gamers in a giant LAN center, that is the number one thing you would like. You don't not out with it sweating. Sweat all you like, mate. Pepper sweat, get in the game. I just don't want that smell. So eliminate the smell with that. Also, if you have the all over the deodorant. You can spray it literally everywhere. You can just go crazy like that, and then you're just done. You don't even have to be super careful and delicate. So I think it's a banger. So it's simple. Get yourself smelling good, because new customers get 20% off site-wide with our exclusive code. That is, of course, summoning. So use code summoning at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide. So that's everything and free shipping. shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Mando's got you covered. Thank you to Mando. Okay. There's also a little bit more we could talk about here, which was, let me see. Oh, that was it. You wanted to bring this up. Bro, I've complained on the past couple of episodes about how weird the LCS schedule is, where they do this weird thing where, they start late, they end late, they end early, and then they just have weeks and weeks off. Bro, the playoffs schedule is so bizarre, because think about this for a second, Nymaera. We just did 4 whole weeks of BO1s, and then we were doing it Saturday, Sunday, Monday. But then on this one, it wasn't Monday, which already is weird, because, it's not the same pattern. So you draw out the BO1s, and then for the playoff schedule, it's just over like 2 weeks, the whole thing. And then not only that, it's 2 weeks now, Nymaera, but get ready. It's Monday, Tuesday. Wait a minute, we never had Tuesday before.
Okay.
But it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's Friday as well. Then on the other week, it's only Monday and Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Like, what's going on? This is bizarre, mate. I would have thought what you'd do is do like 3 weeks, but have it be Saturday, Sunday, Monday again, and split, something like that, or end on the Sunday for the finals. This seems, I know what you mean. It seems like this is almost designed where if you don't see this graphic, you're looking at what days the playoffs are on.
Is there a clash with like VCT, EMEA? Do they need to give studio space to someone else? Because obviously it's shared studio. Yeah, I mean, consistent scheduling is a really big bonus. Now, I remember back when I was watching LCS, back when I first started watching LoL Esports back in like 2013, 2014, it was always on same day, same time. It was always on like Saturday, Sunday, and you would watch it on the weekends. And like, I know what I was doing with my evening. And if it was on the Fridays, I do that too. But I knew when I was watching the games, and because it was regular, I knew what I wanted to do with that. So that's already a difficulty in terms of, well, okay, we are not playing games on this Saturday, Sunday. But then I would think, oh, if we're not playing on Saturday, Sunday, are we just doing it next week? Are we taking like a weekend off? No, it's just happening on the Monday, Tuesday. So I'm like, okay, so it is happening this weekend. It's just on midweek games, which is obviously not great for people who have a working schedule. I get that it happens after the schedule's ended. At least we're into the best of threes. I'll enjoy that. It's 2 best of threes per day, though, which means that if it's 2 best of threes, you got to start like afternoon. Really, you can't start too late into the evening, so which means that again, people who are working on Mondays can't watch as much of that. Then you have a 2-day break between the Monday and the Tuesday. Then you have 4 days in a row, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, with the Monday being the first of the best of 5s. Then you have like a 3-day break, and then you've got 3 days back to back for your last string of things. So it is all very condensed. The biggest gap we have between games is 3 days between the 2 weekends, effectively, and it's not consistent scheduling. I wonder if the viewership is going to take a significant hit. I wonder if it's. I mean, it would already would have done from Los Ratones, but I wonder if they're going to double dip on that. I think that we had some crazy numbers for regular season, but I do wonder what's going to happen with this being so kind of all over the place in terms of scheduling, which has typically been such a negative, and the most popular team in the region not making it through to playoffs. I think this could really hit the viewership.
No, absolutely. Okay. What about, because I agree. I also just think I hate when the schedule isn't intuitive. Like, I would have tried to make it repeat. I would try to have it established that put it this way, a key thing is what days it's never on. That's a really important aspect to do. So I just find this one a bit bizarre. It does seem a bit like you just shot yourself in the foot for no reason with this one.
Unless there's a time constraint thing, I actually haven't thought about. I'm not exactly sure when First Stand takes place. I forgot about that. So that's taking place on 10th of March. So that means effectively, it ends on the 1st, and it's happening. It is happening on 9 days later, effectively. So you can't hold the finals on the 6th, 7th, or the 7th, 6th, the 8th, or whatever, because they'd have 2 days to fly out. Or 3 days to fly out. I'd imagine that's why it is, but this is the problem with the league schedule, right? It's just so condensed. But at that point, why are we not playing things on the 14th, 15th at least? Yeah. I think this would have been fine if it was played on the 14th, 15th, and not the 16th, 17th. Because at that point, you're not hitting the Tuesday day, which just people aren't expecting there to be games on.
And we could have just started a week earlier. I think they started this year on like the 14th or something around then of January, etc. Remember, it's not like we're normal jobs where people get 2 weeks off. People weren't playing right up to Christmas. Everyone was done by about November something. And especially when the playoffs and Worlds comes around, there's only bloody G2 made it. Like, so actually, I think it would be totally reasonable to start a week earlier and then have a little bit of breathing room. And then, because the other thing, like I say, is to me, it's just bizarre to have 4 weeks for the BO1s and then 2 weeks for the actual fucking playoffs. Like, the playoffs is the main part of the tournament for me. I even think of, this is why I actually end up getting excited. It was almost like the who doesn't make it at the bottom end and no one give a fuck about the seeding. I don't really care who comes first, second or third in the regular split. What I care about is who doesn't make it, and I care about survival. Once I'm in the playoffs, now I care about the matchups and who's better and who's going to win. So I actually also just feel like I'd rather have a bit more. I'd rather have an extra week to sort of drag out the playoffs, and make it exciting. Like, especially as you're going to, on the last ones anyway, have to be at the LAN, aren't you? Because you've got the Barcelona finals. So you got that component coming up separately anyway. So I don't know. I would have just tried to get more out of the playoffs myself. There's going to be more matches anyway.
Yeah, and I suppose, I think that having a little bit of extra time would have made more sense. And now you can understand, like, if this is the window of time that they have, how the hell would you play best of threes with like 12 teams of this format? They've been quite ambitious with the amount of games that amount of teams that they've had to put into it. And I think it's barely works out. I mean, obviously, I'm not a fan of best of ones. I don't believe that best of ones are real League of Legends, really. God, but I don't know what else you would have done, really, unless you're going to go commit to a group system already, and groups have their own negatives because you're not seeing, these teams face off against everyone. So yeah, it just seems like it's an unhappy medium, really. They've tried to cram it in because you can't have them fly out on like 2 days' notice out to it's Brazil, right? Their first stand's taking place, and I think it is. So trying to fly out there, get scrims, the international teams, it just wouldn't happen, would it?
Okay, right. What we will do is let's talk a little bit about LCK because there have been some fucking, like, every region's had some strange results, but this one I think takes the cake, mate. Because on paper, in theory, Korea has nearly always been a very stratified region. You have the potential champions. You have the teams that are sort of the gatekeepers of can you go deep in the playoffs. You have the teams below that you would usually in the past have been the Nongshims and the Fear X's, where they're more like, we can get the odd win or we can play a top team close, but we're not supposed to be bad, but we're better than the rest. And at the bottom, you usually had your Brions, your bad DRXs, the Supers, etc. You had those teams that were usually the perennial bottom feeders, and they were usually just crap. 1 or 2 of them would even win barely any matches, and the rest of them were just constantly memed on because you play in the ultimate macro region, and obviously you're looking the worst because you're playing the best teams, but you're not getting anything off in the game, and you're getting torn apart completely. When we talked last week about, you looked at that playing bracket and you were like, this is pretty straightforward, isn't it? DK beats DRX. Obviously, KT's going to beat DN Supers. Then you've got a cool Nongshim KT match. And then you probably get like, DK against, let's say, KT. No, actually what happened was this, guys. So bizarrely, DN Supers actually took care of KT. That's right. BDD's suffering hasn't ended yet. I thought not contending for the title was enough. No. He's in hell right now. He's asked us to watch the LCK Cup playoffs. Then they go into playing the Nongshim, and I'm thinking, well, you know what? There was that cool Nongshim win that they had over fucking Hanwha Life, wasn't there? Maybe actually this scout squad's back. God. No, that's right. DN Supers, who, by the way, I don't care what anyone says, is an appalling team. They beat Nongshim as well. And then in the end, Nongshim has one more chance to still qualify. If you know how this qualifier works, they just have to beat DRX. Now, DRX, certainly, we pointed this out, there's even a side angle. They have, by the way, used the fuck out of coach voice. They are basically team coach voice at this point. Yes. They use it all the time. But I'll tell you what, they're the best advert I've ever seen for this shit because they're fucking working. And then this is the worst part of all. This is the ultimate iniquity. At least the Supers beating Nongshim these would be your threes. DRX 3-0'd Nongshim in a best of 5. So essentially, DN Supers and DRX are the teams who make it out of that bracket, not KT with BDD, not Nongshim with Scout. Mate, already the apple cart's turned upside down. What's going on?
Nongshim is probably a good team to start with because they beat HLE, and we thought, well, this team looks pretty good.
Yeah.
I think about actually, Lehens has got a pretty good track record. King, and I thought was really good last year. Oh, we don't know about Scout and Taeyoon, but they turned up really well there. And then they did it just for like one series, and then they've just failed to impress since. I mean, Nongshim just have just fallen apart, which is really sad to see, because I just assumed that the floor of Nongshim would be good enough to just, at that point, after the win they got against HLE, at least be a solid mid-table team. And I couldn't have been sadly less true on that front really. I feel like Scout probably wasn't the issue, I will say. I think that he was fine, and he has done better than last year. I mean, they did have the loss versus, the supers themselves, which is just ridiculous. I can't believe that Pyosik is winning playoffs, like play-in series in 2026.
This guy, people used to do that joke about Naguri, that when he would die 2 times is what activated the power spike, and then he would like take over and win the game. Pyosik, it's like, the joke is it's only when he's supposed to have no chance that he just pulls like the most bullshit game out of his arse and beats anyone. Remember, he was the one beating T1, the ones that were going to win worlds and shit. Like, the guy's just a meme, but I tell you what, somehow he just does these miracle games. It's fucking insane, isn't it?
He is just one of those guys that, like, he is one of the better overperformers in League. I mean, there are a class of people who are like, okay, on a regular day, they're probably on average not going to be great, but just in the specific moments they find the angle. I find someone like Yagao probably falls into that bracket where he, occasionally beat Knight in a playoff series, had that one MSI 23 where he beat both, by the way, beat Chovy and Knight in Chovy and Faker in best of fives at one tournament, which I don't think basically anyone has done that, across League history. Pyosik is one of those guys that, occasionally finds the angle. But the funniest thing for me is, like, we were seeing both sides of him in the single game, that Lee Sin game where he had that awful top lane dive where he just kind of hops in, thinks, oh, I'm going to hit the Q, and just gets hit by a Sion Q that dies. Then later into the game gets the kick at the Baron, which kind of ends up finishing the game in true Lee Sin fashion, which Lee Sin not even a champion in meta either.
I know.
And then, also looking back to some of the other picks that he's had in the season 2, like, he's been playing stuff like the Hecarim, which no one else pretty much in the world has played. Now, this guy is just an anathema to me, but credit to them, there is a certain degree of clutch playmaking from them, which I just didn't expect, really. I mean, I think Closer showed up a little better than I gave him credit for, and I suppose Docdam is a player which Docdam and Peter did just go to World Finals, and they've got a little bit of that. I mean, I'm not saying that every game's good for them. I mean, look at the first game versus Nongshim, they got absolutely blown out, right? But yeah, I mean, and of course, games like that made you think, well, maybe Nongshim will just run away with it. But clearly, the clutch factor was not in favor of Nongshim, who had that one series versus HLE, and then they've just struggled to pull together good victories after that point, sadly for them. So I guess, like, the fact that it's Nongshim that kind of take a step down, but it's actually like teams like DRX and Supers which actually fill that gap. Well, okay, DRX are actually a little bit better, because I actually really like UCal, and I think that Will has been a little bit better on some fronts too. But I think particularly Supers making it through this bracket was just a huge eyebrow raise. And I don't really know how far they go through this, right? Because, I mean, you've got BFX versus DNS now, which realistic. Well, I mean, we said this at the start of the play-ins bracket, and we thought it should be pretty done and dusted, but who knows at this point? Looks like there's been a decent amount of variance from that. So yeah, I think DNS particularly, I looked at just going like, well, Pyosik should be doing Pyosik things somehow in 2026.
Yeah, one of the things about Pyosik is, I'll describe it this way. The archetype of him is he is just like the ultimate fucking dice roll. One of the things about his style of jungle is he is super high variance. It's why, look, if I actually had a world championship level roster, I wouldn't want this guy on my team. He'll throw the fucking game for me. But I'll tell you what, if I am some like bullshit underdog team that isn't supposed to win the match, fucking put this guy in the game, of course. Like, just let him just swing for the fences. And if he gets some crazy haymaker knockout, we win a game. Like, I will say, actually, in that sense, he does somewhat counter the Korean regions. Why I've always thought Beryl had bizarre upset potential, because these guys don't do. I've always said to Monty, my biggest complaint always about Korean League of Legends is when they're the lesser team with lesser players, they're just like too formal. They're just like, well, we're supposed to still do the correct response to what Gen G just did to us. And it's like, if you do that, you just get fucking dominated from the beginning of the game to the end, and they correctly do the move, and you correctly do the counter, but they just keep winning, and their margin just grows, and you're never ever in the game. Like, the one thing about the LPL that's good is people will just do this. They'll just go fucking crazy and throw the crickets and sink at you.
Do you think it helps that Pyosik knows he's not going to mechanically outplay his enemy jungle? It's like, look, folks, I got my world title. I mean, even in that finals, folks, if you watch back the 22 world finals, he was not doing great in the whole jungle matchup. I actually wonder if it helps Pyosik being like, I'm not beating these guys regularly. Give me fucking Ambassador jungle. Not many other people playing that in LCK right now. Give me the Lee Sin, the Hecarim. And I kind of appreciate how he's trying to change that meta, because one of the ways that one of the ways you classically used to beat some well, basically non-T1 teams, basically, was you just throw something weird curveball at them, and their prep just doesn't cover it. But even then, that doesn't. I mean, do we talk about the KT Rolster game now, because they were the team which were on the other side of that? It happened to KT again. The horrible torture experiment for poor BDD continues, not just losing in the Telecom War. In a Game 5 finals, not just losing the 14,000 gold lead just before this, they did it again. Just a huge gold lead, and they push into the base, and things go horribly wrong for them. And of course, KT Rolster probably, even with the loss to T1, people would have thought, okay, they'll, they probably have a good shot of making it through, or they'll have a competitive shot at making it through. Stomp through the early game, and I just can't believe that the core of this roster, which went to Worlds Finals, has failed on so many fundamental levels. If you watch back to the clips of KT Rolster losing in the first base push when they had their highest gold lead, there is this golden rule of team fighting, which is never stand both your carries on top of each other. If you stand your carries on top of each other, you get engaged on, and you die. And guess what happens here? They got engaged on by Peters Nico, and they died. So I can't believe that this team is just one which doesn't have those fundamentals in place when you have veteran players. You've got
also quite bitter to have your old fucking support be the one to do it as well. Come on.
Yeah,
come on.
This is a team with Cuz and BDD. I think have been the rock of this team, particularly when Cuz has been on form. And I think actually one of the issues is that Cuz has not been on form as he was towards the end of last summer, and then of course going into Worlds as well. KT at Worlds last year were a team that I think were maybe the best prepped and coached team at the event, because they were punching so far above their level. They were really downloading the enemy team in draft, and then in terms of the way that they played around objectives as well. The way I looked at the way that KT Rolster played was very intelligent. I thought that they actually they had the stuff out of game. All of their out of game prep was really good. So how the hell has that gone from that to, obviously the roster changing, but you've still got a lot of the same kind of back end staff working the same way? How have they lost so many fundamentals? That just doesn't make sense to me how that happens in the space of a couple of months. I mean, for you to lose not just one hilarious gold lead, which rarely happens to any team anywhere, but to not just do that once but twice, and one of them as T1, you can kind of accept it, but doing it against fucking the supers, that is nearly unforgivable, actually. So KT Rolster, it's a shame that we're wasting yet another split and potentially yet another year of BDD. And then, of course, the mental boom came in and they lost the next game in the series too. But it's genuinely painful watching this KT Rolster team in a way which is even uniquely painful to before.
There is actually a detail I forgot as well. We can actually show you a graphic, and we'll put it on the screen either now or in post, which emphasizes what I was talking about. Remember, even on the off season, we were already talking about how will the coach voice be used? Will it be leaned on? Right? If people don't know, DRX is team coach voice. So out of 16 games, they used it in all 16 games. They've used it 45 times. By the way, the second most usage was Bro, that did it in half the games. They did it 18 times. So they're using it not that much over 3 times more than even a Brion. That's also not a particularly good team, etc., etc. And you go and you look, and mate, I have to say, I don't think this is some placebo. You watch their team, they have had a whole bunch of games, because also it looks like they use it quite aggressively early in the games as well. They don't just wait until I think a lot of people expected coach voice to be used for mid-game macro type things of you guys remember with this comp you got to bait the Baron, so some sort of extra instructions as it were that you wish you could give in a timeout but you don't have in League of Legends. It seems like in their team they also use it actually quite early on and use it for that regard, etc. So far no one knows yet, will this ever be used again? Is it something that's a one-off for this split? But it's certainly, I would say the experiment has certainly been interesting just because of the DRX results.
Well, that one, and I think it's very interesting because obviously HLE are out, and we didn't talk about this then. HLE didn't use a single coach voice despite the fact they were bombing out. Because I remember when we were previewing coach voice, because it's only being used in LCP and LCK. We've been seeing it in 2 regions. I don't know how it's gone in LCP. I've not kept up enough in terms of how their usage of the coach voice has happened there. But I did wonder, and we questioned this at the time, if a team like T1, Genji, HLE starts struggling, do they start using coach voice? Clearly for HLE, no, they didn't, and they still bombed out anyway. But I'm very surprised that they didn't try and desperation use it, because I would have thought they would have tried to, particularly because they were a team which weren't on the same page. They weren't choosing the right fights. I don't think their setup for objectives was very good. I don't think they were choosing the right terrain. And I do actually wonder whether Coach Voice would have helped them. Maybe their thought is, look, we can try using it, but it's not going to fix the fundamental issues. But I would have thought they would at least try and use it to get into playoffs or something like that. Because remember, all they had to do was win one game versus Gen G. All it was one game in the below the amount of time they needed to. They need like a win in like lower than 40 seconds or 34 minutes or something like that. So I was quite interested by that one too, of course. And then T1 Fake is their coach anyway, so why would they need Coach Voice at that point? But yeah, I mean, yeah, DRX, they definitely use a ton of it for that early game, like you were saying. And yeah, I mean, DRX have actually punched away. Well, I mean, they actually have a decent roster now. They're not like the DRXs of the past, which had just kind of like they're there for the fun of it. They're realistically not going to get results. This is actually on paper pretty good, and I think Andil also had a pretty good series to finish things off too. Yeah, I don't actually, though, think about it again. I don't think it's crazy that they beat. I don't think it's crazy that they beat Nongshim themselves. It's just sad for Nongshim that they did nothing really. You know.
Okay, the playoffs have arrived. We've got the first round matchups. And remember, the way it goes in LCK is after the first round, then you have the selection actually of like the top seed gets to pick, basically Gen G gets to pick who they want to play against in that scenario. So the opening matchups are DN Supers, who no longer apparently are a meme, against BFX, FearX have been one of the better teams in the league. And then we have the DK against DRX, actual rematch of what happened in the play-in. So what are your thoughts on the BFX? Like, do you actually now think Supers can do something against them? Will this be a BFX win? Where are you going on this one?
I think BFX look really, really good. And while I think that closer has been doing fine, I mean, I'm standing by my take from earlier in this play because Vikler has continued to be good. I think Vikler is genuinely one of the best mid laners in the world right now. He's been playing really, really well. And I think that's going to limit some of the impact which Pioshik has. That's one thing. I think that, because Pioshik actually has to have any impact for Supers to have, a good game as well, right? Like he is that coin flip, but you need to have the positives of him. And the other worry is that if you have Dokdam and Peter playing for Supers, their laning phase is not their specialty, and you do have Diablo on the other side. And if Diablo gets a good start, particularly in the meta right now, which really seems to favor Diablo, where you can play the Yunara. He's a very good Kai'Sa player, which you can start playing in as well. He's an Ezreal player, what have you. I think that there is a chance that Supers get just completely sucker punched, just bleeding mouth right from the start of the game because bot lane's gone very well and Vikler was actually the first one out onto the roam. So I think that it would be quite foolish to not put FearX like pretty far above them right now, but then again, does seem like Supers do actually have a decent amount of clutch potential. We are going into best of fives, obviously, as well. They did play the best of five against each other actually in the Super Week, so we have seen a bit of a preview. I think BFX kind of has to come in his favor. So I haven't seen anything which really changed my mind too much.
Yeah, if people don't know, basically Diablo is like their Kalist in Korea. He's not only like Rookie of the Year, mega, but he was one of those rookies where you're like, actually, he's almost mixing up already. Like, he's fucking really good. Like, if anything, he's actually in a weaker team in relative to that analogy. And I'll even say, what tortures me even more about watching BFX now is, I don't know if everyone remembers this, but way back at the beginning of the season, when there was all the roster moves and rumors, this was one of the players, along with 1XN, that the rumor was IG could have picked up instead of motherfucking and it's like, so you might, essentially of the three, you might pick the only one that fucking sucks. Brilliant. You could have had either a Korean stud or a Chinese stud. You just chose to have a bomb that I don't even know how he gets to the
I'm
team.
just saying, but by the way, if because IG are playing as fucking OMG, like Nirvana team for their players, if they lose to them, you are never living that down, man. I'm so sorry.
It's all good for me, mate. Listen, Rookie already had his years as the best. Doesn't matter now. And he's not even the player that's fucking up, mate. He's still fighting most of these matches. That's a sad thing. But you cannot do anything with the top and ADC.
No, you can't.
No, it's not you can do at all. Anyway, I do think on that one, sadly, the RX run, it probably ends here, mate. Like, maybe you can win the low bracket game, not impossible, but I think you will be losing this match. I think BFX is just a better team. As I say, I think they've actually got a player that's probably above the level of their squad, so fair play. They've looked into it.
Yeah, no,
the other one, go on.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, like, basically anything which GNS does in this playoffs will be punching above their weight. And I think they'll be happy to do so. I think they're a team which a lot of people are like, well, realistically, they get this bot lane, which looks pretty good, and Close has had decent last run of form. But I think when you're going up against the teams on the form that they're on, with BFX really starting to become quite a significant team as well, if they do anything in this playoffs, it will be an overperformance.
And then, as I say, we've actually already seen this match. It's just it was a BO3. So DK won the other one 2-0. Now they're all playing a BO5. Look, I'll throw this out there. In theory, some analyst thinking does go that when you play someone and lose to them, it sort of teaches you actually where you need to put your efforts and what you need to change. With that said, can DRX actually win this one?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think that, put it this way, I think that the playoffs is very much a two-horse race, and then D plus Kia are very much in third, and then you have the rest. I think that's the way that is. And then the question is basically, can BFX kind of punch up to a team like D plus Kia? I think they might be pretty close, but we have like pretty significant stratified teams here at this point. And I was talking to Degon about this the other day, and apparently D plus Kia, at least on the LCK side of things, they are considered the dark horse team. I think particularly with Showmaker being very good form right now, it feels like he is in that moment of like, look, it's winter Showmaker. This guy can do anything. As long as Korea doesn't have like a really bad performance like he did he had himself like a couple of bad performances just at the end of regular splits. He's had some good ones too, but if Korea doesn't low roll, I'm pretty sure that should just be a bit of a stomp based on how good Showmaker is. Now, I like UCal. UCal is a good player, but Showmaker is so good at taking playmakers, especially, I think, because the patch is going to be Phase Rush nerfed. I think it is, in fact. Yeah, because it's 26.3. That means we're probably going to see a few less mages, a few more playmakers like Ari, maybe Silas, maybe something like like those kind of champions. Well, maybe in LeBlanc, which he always tends to play anyway, right? I think that the meta is very happy for him. UCal is good. I think Showmaker won't care. I think he'll just spread his impact onto the map, and I think that DRX is going to be there's going to be a hard matchup for them. Yeah.
Now, on some almost like wrestling / how they do professional boxing shit, we're building up this Gen GT1 game to be the ultimate like hold, now go finally. And we're not going to probably see it at this point in time till like a week and a half from now, basically, because they're probably going to meet in the upper bracket final, presumably. And then we'll finally get a taste of what happens when these two teams play each other for real with the full rosters, with no shenanigans. And people don't know in that, in the Kesper Cup thing, they actually had like scuffed roster for the Gen G team. It was only T1 that brought the real roster. So I obviously everyone's looking forward to that. Well, at the moment, with how T1's played, the funny thing is, if you're a T1 fan, you can absolutely legitimately be back in the like, we're the best team in Korea. Like, we're going to win the fucking split. Yeah. It's a totally plausible thought. So what's cool is we're so far away, and we can obviously build this up over the weeks as we see them all go head to head and then eventually meet. Well, actually, on Polymarket, they have a market for who will win the LCK Cup. And unsurprisingly, the two teams with the highest percentage are Gen G and T1. And at the moment, the traders have Gen G at 56% and they have T1 at 41%. So actually, at the moment, they're going with the roster that was the dominant team last year, the LCK, etc. Actually, people not currently totally buying into T1, even though they are very strong second. Right? What are your thoughts on who should be the winner of this LCK Cup?
Now, obviously, Gen G are undefeated in games, so they have a really strong run of form. Even with that, I think that this is the best meta read which T1 has had in regular season in this era of League of Legends compared to Gen G. Because I think having roaming supports and like proactive jungle support play with like strong lanes has been working really, really well for them. I think that Keen is probably the best top laner in the world, but I think that Thorin is probably second best right now, and I think he can actually contest him, which is a crazy thing to say, given domestic Doran's typically had a good run of form, but last year it was less so from Doran on an individual level. I think he can actually compete with Keen now, which is crazy to say. Faker is on incredible form himself. I think that Chovy hasn't been at peak Chovy. He's been good, but I don't think he's been as dominant as the start of the year for the last 2 years. I think if you look at his early 25 in terms of stats, and then early 24 just in everything, really, Chovy was kind of unbeatable. I don't think he's got that aura about him right now. I think there's a lot of good signs. And that's where we start in the regular season typically. It's like, well, okay, typically, Gen G look like they're really good, and then T1 play up to them in playoffs. They turn up and make it a really good matchup. If already before we even reach the playoffs and T1 look like they have good meta read, very good players on form, carrier best support in the world, I think, by far, Faker actually on a very good mechanical level as well, this is the best shot that T1 will have to beat Gen G domestically. At least it's the best shot that they've had of this era. So for me personally, knowing that also T1 do tend to show up better and better in playoffs, I mean, they do show up for big games, even though they tend to lose against Gen G. I think this might be the time. I actually think this might be the time where T1, who play an inherently riskier style, I think it's okay for them to drop a game or two in series. They tend to play more for retaking the objective rather than sitting on it itself, and kind of like consistently starving out vision. I think the way that Gen G plays the game is a lot more rigorous. It's more consistent at getting you wins, whereas T1 have actually, in this meta, I think they have a higher ceiling. I think it's still going to be close. I think I'm actually slightly favoring T1, though, based on meta read.
Okay. I'm going to go still with Gen G. I agree with the market and the traders, essentially. And the reason why is this, except for actually, funnily enough, in the group stage of the LCK Cup last year, most of the time domestically, Chovy is just much better than Faker. He just is. Actually, Faker does have times in regular splits where he's off his game or his champion pool looks limited. It's why actually the glow up for Worlds every time is some like Jesus has risen from the fucking tomb shit.
Yeah.
Like, and it's only at the moment everyone thinks he's just done so, that he did the big revival, but that hasn't tended to be as much in regular season play. In fact, there's even reasons I would shade in there of like sort of semi-intangibles, which is if you hear the stories over the years that he has like potentially like wrist issues or whatever, yeah, I can imagine when you have like a bit more time to like chill a little bit, do some scrims in the boot camp and sort of like tend to the injury, as it were, and get yourself in a tip-top shape. It's why I think he starts the year great and he ends the year great at Worlds, but the middle part gets really rough because that's when you just, it's the wear and tear of every fucking day, scrims, solo queue, a game, into another game, into... So the other thing as well, and for me, is this. I do think the interesting thing is, I do think this T1 in regular split looks much better than all the ones they had in the past few years. It looks way better than ZOFGK and even the one with Thorin last year. So I think actually this, I'll give you that there's a good chance. This is where also the double Olymp fact is interesting because I could see this being a world where like T1 could win one of the series, but then still potentially Gen G wins overall. So I'm going to say overall, I don't even think it's that much of a hot take from my end. I just think this core is unfucking believable at winning like actual series that have the pressure of being LCK. That still matters, but it's not the same as the Worlds thing of like, this is your whole career, man. You like, I think that's what gets them. These are more just like, it's a split of LCK. Okay, we've done this before. We've been here a million times, and we've won a million times. So I'd still take Gen G.
And I do understand that because, again, Gen G regionally have just been monolithic. Of course, they lost to HLE this time last winter, and then, of course, summer 24 as well. So it's not like they haven't taken some losses regionally, but it just hasn't been to T1. They've just had T1's number regionally, despite there being some close series. There have been some 5-game series between the two of them, which Gen G have come out on top of. I do want... This is actually something which we can't predict this, right? But... Ryu is the coach now, not Kim. So they have had a change in coaching staff. And I do wonder that specifically when you were mentioning between, okay, what happens after the first series? And we look with this bracket, and they just look so much further ahead than the rest of the teams here. What happens if one team wins the first best of 5 and then with the different coaching staffs, and then also with T1 with a different roster again with Pays coming in? Does that change the way that they prep for the next series? Because we're likely going to see double best of 5 say between the two,
so, yes.
which is great. I think these are probably the two best teams in the world right now. I don't think there's a team from the LPL which will push. Well, yeah, right now they're not going to push them like that. So we are going to see two best of 5s between the two best teams in the world. Which again, that's the LCK Classic, and that's what you tune in for. But Gen G does have different coaching staff now, but we just can't predict how that changes their prep because one of the ways that Gen G looked most vulnerable past tense is when they had bad drafts. And you look back to the World's semifinals where they just completely bombed it against KT. There was just an unplayable draft in the HLE series as well. They just had some drafts where it just felt like, okay, you're great players, but you're not making it through with that. I don't know whether they'll find themselves in a similar situation with Ryu and whoever's drafting on stage with them. Obviously, players input a lot on draft too, to a certain extent too, because they input on the matchups and their prep for those particular drafts as well. But yeah, I think that's still... I'm actually quite up on T1. I think that their players are on really good form, and I think that their meta read is the best that it's been compared to Gen G's domestically in this recent era of rivalry.
Also, I'll just add narratively, Ryu, mate, if you join Gen G and they haven't lost to T1 and Faker for years domestically in the playoffs and you somehow lose, that is going to be the meme of all memes. That face will be spammed all over Twitter for a whole fucking day. That like... Vietnam, fucking, it'd be insane, mate. Like, even though you're thinking that was years ago, you don't understand that meme factory will get going real quick, boys, real quick.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, even when Ryu was on like HDK in Europe, his teammate, because this was quite when he came to Europe at that point, it was quite soon after the Faker versus Ryu Reserve versus
Sure.
Z1 play. His teammates would leave the play running on his PC, and when he went to the toilet, something like come back in, and people would have the clip just like on all of the PCs in his damn practice room. In fact, actually, in 2016 summer finals, I was just a fan, but I went out to the event in Poland, and I was wearing my SKT shirt, and they're like, it was Odoamne who just like dragged me. I was like, "Hey Ryu, look, it's your favorite team." Like he's just never living this down for his whole career. He's been pretty good spirited about it, but that shit is never leaving him.
Oh no. No, exactly. Even though the worst part that I'll always remind people was, it was actually a meaningless play. The team would have won the game anyway. But unfortunately, people remember it because it just shows how people misremember and make things cooler than they were. People think that play was like some epic moment in a battle, you know, where you go, hey, both teams, let's just make this you and me, king against king. Whoever wins this wins the match. That wasn't really what happened. It was just a cool play because it was the end of the game. Like they'd actually already won. But look, it was iconic. And it is also, I don't care what anyone says. Door's call, that might be the most iconic fucking casting call in the history of League. And he nailed it, bro. He fucking nailed it. No mistakes, technically excellent. The lines are even, everyone can remember it now. But the moves weren't fake it. Oh, it was fucking unreal. It was one of the best moments ever.
There are very few moments in broadcast history which you can remember so vividly because of the words that were spoken there. I can't think of many of the casting calls where like I think of the lines and I remember immediately the play like that. The other one would actually be Machine with the KD in 1v4 in CS,
Sure.
the Pro League one, because holy shit, that's again like well up there in terms of my favorite casting moments of all time. But yeah, Doa is probably one of the most heard voices across the world because of that one play, which that
Yes.
you can't. Yeah, the blind pick does tend to go. Blind pick gives you that kind of crazy drama, which you just don't quite get in the same way now.
It's also why me and Monty have always donked on Riot, because famously they said to Dor, first of all, they double whammied here. They said to him when he sort of asked, like, why I can't get like hired to fucking Worlds again, etc. They told him, you don't have the gravity. So they even fucked up. They didn't say gravitas. They said gravity. So, okay, they said you don't have the gravity as a caster. And one, that is just dumb because you don't know what the actual term is there. There's not the word gravity at all. It's gravitas. And then secondly, the idea he doesn't have the gravitas, he literally to this day has the most iconic call in the history of League of Legends, which he fucking nailed and made epic in a totally organic way. Like, it just makes you sound like you don't know what you're talking about if you critique like that, you know. By the way, here's the actual move you do if you're the Riot guy. Stay clear of all that. One, you don't even know what those words mean. You obviously know fuck all about casting. Just say, I don't particularly think you're that good as a caster. If you stick with that, you're safe. It's just your opinion. You can have your opinion all day long if you're my employer, but you are just objectively wrong in my opinion. Just say you didn't have the fucking. Yeah. I think what they did there is they bought into the Reddit meme that all Dor ever did is make Star Wars jokes. No, that was when it was downtime. He was an excellent caster.
And don't get me wrong, he did do a lot of them, but that's why I loved him too. I mean, from the caster side of it, I'm always going to prefer someone just saying, I don't like you because of X. And that's okay. Like at the end of the day, every caster is aware that casting is subjective. Yeah. And you can't impress everyone, I suppose. But what that also means is like, it goes, if you want casters which you prefer, tell them the casting that you do like, and then they can make a decision if they're going to move towards that. Maybe they'll make a decision and say, actually, no, I prefer what I'm doing anyway. This is my style. I think I can make the most of it. But realistically, if you tell someone what you don't like about their casting, as long as it's an actually, an objective way, and say, this isn't good, that isn't good, I don't like this, then they can make the decision to work towards your version of better casting.
Yes. Okay. I mean, luckily, the other good thing about LCK is it is a very healthy fucking playoff bracket format too. You're going to get a ton of games here. And actually, if anything, I'll tell you what the actual more optimistic side is. Look, I was very cynical about this split Nymaera because Gen G and T1 have awesome rosters. I hoped Tanwa Life would be the other team I was supposed to be interested in. They've blown it. And then I saw that KT was kind of whatever anyway. The regular season, they were never going to beat a Gen G or a T1 in best of. If anything, at least the floor of this playoffs has been raised. Like those bad teams, actually now, even those matches are interesting. Like I actually can't be. I could even see a world absolutely where one of these teams could beat DK. Probably won't be DRX, but like who knows? Maybe they can lose to BFX, for example. Like I don't think that's an implausible matchup. So I do think like actually there's going to be more parity. And then actually it's because we haven't seen the match at all. I get to see finally the Gen GT one. I'm with you. Hopefully we'll just get the 2BO5s. Hopefully it's the upper bracket in the grand final, and we get the massive million people viewing, and we have the awesome games that we all like to have every split.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there probably are about 3 tiers of teams, and I think that Gen G and T1 are clear of the rest of them. But I think all of the rest, even stuff like D plus versus the other teams, I'm like, yeah, they probably will stomp down on everyone that isn't versus BFX, but they should still be entertaining series. And I also feel like, in general, the style of League of Legends that's being played in LCK right now is actually quite entertaining as well. We're seeing, we've got some different teams trying out some different picks. Like obviously DNS are probably the best one, like in terms of the random jungle picks or whatever. But I think that Showmaker's in great form. He's always very creative, playing stuff like Zoe and the Twisted Fate as well. BFX have this crazy 80 carries that's quite easy to kind of show what kind of style they have around this just very Diablo-centric comp as well. Yeah, I mean, it's a double elimination best of 5 bracket. So you're always going to get yourself a very rigorous set of results there. And once we do, even if we aren't going to, if we get Gen G T1 versus like a lower tier team, that's probably going to be a stomp. Everything else should at least be very entertaining, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, key detail is this is the split where the change from the format is the top 2 teams go. So the good news is, by the way, in an ideal world, you get Gen G and T1 at first stand. That's actually going to be really fucking insane. Like, I actually think this will make first stand have a value at water. Because unfortunately, last year's first stand, Nymaera, I genuinely think made people have like a nightmare remembering of what like the old shit MSI format was like. And it was like, oh, you just remade that. Like, this one actually, look, if you have the top 2 from each of the major regions in terms of like fucking LCK and all that, that's going to be banging, mate. That's actually going to be a really interesting international tournament.
Yeah, no, you've got Korea with 2 seeds, China with 2 seeds, and then you've got EU, LCP, NA, and then CBLOL all sending 1 seed, which I think is about fair.
That's very fair. Yeah.
That gives you, because we only had the 4 teams last time around, right? And they played a single best of 3 round robin. Now what they're doing is they're doing basically they're doing GSL groups. They're doing two groups for the 8 teams, double elimination that goes into a best of 5 single elim playoffs bracket, which I think is actually completely fine. That's fairly concise. You get a bunch of different series. Now, the problem with that is that you're not going to see, like last year, at least you saw every team versus every other team, which is when you've got a very compact amount of teams. That's very cool to see because you get to really quite accurately, or at least get some data on every region versus every other region, which I think in another world is quite good for seeding future international events because you have, direct competition between those teams. But yeah, I mean, sending 2 teams from Korea, T1 Gen G are just going to rip a hole in this tournament, man. I mean, yeah, I'm sure like anyone's Legend are probably going to go and they'll be fine, but I don't see a second team from LPL which is going to hold a candle to them right now. And even then, anyone's Legend have got to get there. They got to get some stuff in order as well. They're definitely not at the level of T1 Gen G. I suppose with Atakan gone, we can't throw out that objective anymore. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what T1 Gen G do because we're likely going to see in the space of like a month, probably about 3 best of 5s between those 2 teams. Probably, actually. That's going to be a good amount of data again on the matchup between what we seem to be the 2 best teams in the world.
The thing is, Nymaera, I'm greedy. I just want more. I'm like that Kylo Ren meme. When he's doing that, like fucking ego raging. Because here's what I want. I want the first stand final to be Gen GT1. I want the LC Cup final to be Gen GT1. I want MSI final to be Gen GT1. And then I want Worlds final too. I want them to play like 5 fucking times, the finals. And then at the end of it all, like I'm just going to go like, well, let's stop counting titles. Just finals that you beat against them. Oh, trophies like 10-2 or something. I want to do that. I want pure greed. I also, by the way, I actually just think it would be awesome. Like we never had all the international finals just be all the fucking Koreans non-stop back. Because obviously the old MSI format didn't allow for it. It also just hasn't happened. It all, except for this last one. We had Chinese teams mixing it up and going there. So you could actually, in theory, have that. That would also be pretty cool. Because again, the stakes for both sides, by the way, are huge. Imagine if you fake and you win them all. Holy fuck, that would be like an insane narrative. If you're Gen G, you could catch up pretty quick if you trophy you win all these finals over Faker and this stud pace lineup would be kind of cool too. So I want it more. I want it all, mate. Now, speaking of wanting more, or less, you can have your own opinion. At Prize Picks, they will give you $50 in lineups after you play just your first $5 lineup. And it's really easy. You might not even know anything about the sport, by the way. Maybe you're a casual fan who just watches basketball, etc. Obviously, football's over now. One of the best things is it's super easy. You just pick between 2 and 5 projected stats thingamajigs. All you do is pick more or less on it. So essentially, just think about where that's at. How good is the player? You're also just picking a more or less. There's nothing to it. There aren't 10 options. You're just picking it. They have loads and loads of extra features. And especially, this is one of the key things for me, They actually have a thing also where if you want to make it a fun thing, like you have some friends that also are playing, you also all want to enter it. So they have a thing where you can copy their picks if they're doing good picks. You can copy picks of people who are currently winners. You can also share your picks really easy. It's got like a social function if you want to make it fun and have some banter and some trash talk, etc. So it's simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code summoning to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code summoning to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineups. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. And I tell you what, that could almost be the subtitle / motto of Summoning Insight, if you know. In fact, if people don't know, a piece of deep lore for you. Monty, like me, we're so elitist. We've even tried, because you have to understand, I'll let you behind the curtain. Me and Monty were those guys where, because we grew up as kids in the 80s and in the early 90s, as we were at the tail end of sort of the Gen X, like, I'm trying to be an individual and be my own, and I'm unique. So that's why I was into like hacker culture and nerds and battle. And Monty was into like, you know, I don't know, fucking reading Byron and having like here's the joke. Are you ready? If you understand this, you understand Monte Cristo. Monty loves industrial music, hates 9 Inch Nails. If you can comprehend that, you will understand Monte Cristo. That's the point. So because we're such elitists, famously, a detail about me and Monty is we've never used the like function on Twitter. Because do you know what, Nymaera? We've never discussed this, but I notice we're both on the same page, and this is where me and him are kindred spirits. That's because, Nymaera, that's kind of a bit gauche to just like something. You either love it and you're all in, so everyone knows, Thorin, just retweet, baby. I don't have a like button. I used to retweet just pictures of girls' asses when I was back in my more degenerate so much. People would even be saying
do that for clear love.
People, I used to just post Kate Upton's tits every time he had a carry game. No, people would even be DMing me like, why'd you just retweet this girl's ass with like a big handprint? I was like, because that's dope. Like, fuck it, I didn't give a fuck. So the point is, we just like, there is one, you can't see it now, sadly. There is one tweet that Monty had liked on his account. And it was someone just replying to Monty about something spurious like 9 years ago. And they were saying something, and Monty said something or other. And their reply was just something like, well, in the end, isn't it just more important to always be right or something? And Monty just liked that one tweet. And that was just left like, like an archived piece of history that's like his. So yeah, in many ways, that is the sub-theme of this show is, aren't we right again? I mean, if you notice, if my style is this, if I think I'm right about something, I'm gonna let you know. You're not gonna be under any look. Well, did Thorin ever say that? I'll let you know, mate. I'll bring it up next week. Don't worry. That's who I am.
I don't know. My own approach is like, because I view myself as a forever student in some ways. And I at some point, maybe I graduate towards that school of thought as well. But I consider myself, you know, never beyond wanting to, the path of learning more about something. There is somewhat of a danger of that where you kind of undermine your own authority on something too, which is, I think it took me a while, particularly in broadcast, where I was like, okay, well, you know, I haven't had great feedback on XYZ internally at XYZ. And actually, I didn't have the presence of mind at that point to go, actually, no, I actually think I would contest that. And it's taken me a while to get round into that point. So, you know, I'm earlier on in that journey. I've got a little bit more character development to go until I reach the, I at the end of the day, being right is what matters. And I believe I am right in all cases, you know.
Listen, you just got to put the reps in and you got to have the battles, and eventually, you know, you get the confidence to believe you are indeed right. Okay. What about, actually, we teased it earlier. We'll talk, we're going to leave the LPL to the end because there's some bag of shit in there, some crazy stuff. Let's do the LCS stuff, because as you pointed out, there's actually a couple of angles here that are mad, which is, at the moment, mate, there's some really weird stuff going on in the LCS. So, for example, I actually saw this post by Apollo and went and looked into it. When Cloud9 played Lion, they actually have a game where like a vision bug just fucks the game completely, where basically if you sweep on a pink ward, that is supposed to disable the ward and you get revealed to the enemy team, right? Despite Saint that never got that, basically. Like, they were the Cloud9 saw him because of the bot.
Yeah, I seem to remember it was like, so they had a pink ward which was disabling a ward that was already, so they were disabling a ward, right? So that what that should mean is that you're not seen by the enemy team's vision. It's see-through for it. Now, I believe what happened in that case was,
because his angle to flank was looking fucking mega, mate. Like, he would have had a really good position.
Basically, I actually I didn't go a slow-mo look over that one, actually. But basically, I think what happened was, it should have, basically, Saint ends up getting like a really big flank angle where I think he was seen when he shouldn't have been, and it ended up kind of revealing like this Ari flank. Now, I saw some comments basically saying like, look, realistically, the game was kind of over anyway, and I do somewhat agree with that too. But the problem is, as the player which is suffering from that bug, that's a really rare one where if it is actually a bug, you don't actually know it's happened because they are getting the information from you. So that really sucks because if you think there is, if basically at that point you just assume they had another way to tell you were there through vision. You don't assume it is a bug like that.
Yes. No, I'm with you. I thought I'd just bring it up because it's one of those
Yeah.
ones where, like, I actually think that's a really difficult situation because the problem is, just like as you saw there, the bummer is when you look back through the VOD and you're like, oh, what the fuck, what that? But you can't have known in the moment. I mean, no one would even, that's not even the one as you're saying, Nymaera, because you can't know yourself on your client. You can't even do the pause. You can't even be like, hey, admin, like, pause, something went wrong. You can't get it. And that's, and unfortunately, when you then lose the game, it just doesn't matter at that point in time. No one's ever going to give you a rematch, right? You hinted at it earlier. Bro, did we not tease this at the beginning or not? 8 teams isn't enough to do a fucking Swiss system. And this is one of the reasons why. So bizarrely, they've done this Swiss system and they've managed to end up with 3 teams in second place with a 2-1 record. But the problem is they have to actually make those 2, 3, and 4. And so they've ended up with this scenario where Sentinels got to come second, but they actually had already lost to the FlyQuest team. Is that who I'm thinking of?
Yeah, so Sentinel. Yes. So basically, so the thing which is getting people up in arms here is effectively Sentinels ended up as second seed because I believe the tiebreaker is based on strength of opponent, the strength of the opponents that you'd beaten. So in the case of FlyQuest, they had beaten Shopify Rebellion, who were 8th, and then DSG, who were 4th, whereas Sentinels had beaten Dignitas, who was 7th, and then Team Liquid, who was 6th. Actually, that doesn't sound quite right in that case, actually.
Seems weird as well, doesn't it? Yeah.
And then Cloud9, of course, beat both of those team. They ended up beating. They ended up beating FlyQuest, and Sentinels obviously go through second.
And if you're FlyQuest, what you're saying is this: I lost to Cloud9. What was I supposed to do? You lost to Disguised Toast. What?
And look, the Skies have looked like, well, they ended up being 2-1 themselves, I suppose. But basically, it's just like, what it came down to was Sentinels. I can't actually remember the ruling on this. I should look this one up. But they ended up getting second, and people are up in arms about it. And effectively, the problem is, how would you determine the tiebreakers? Basically, how would you do that? I mean, because some people are saying, well, look, FlyQuest took a game off of Cloud9. Shouldn't that count for more because it's a game win versus the first place team or something like that? Or some people are saying, effectively, if you go 2-0, shouldn't you just be determining between first and second with that round 3 matchup from 2-0? Well, that doesn't necessarily make sense because what happens if you've got a bad draw in round 2 or round 1? You know, at that point, you could have technically a stronger team going lower down in seeding because they had a harder draw and they actually already faced realistically, if you'd just taken that earlier round and put it into the 3rd round, it probably would have been very fitting for a first and second place match. But because they ended up facing earlier, it doesn't end up determining those seeds. So out of anything besides eye test for an 8-team Swiss bracket, how do you rigorously choose seeds? Because I think you can choose within reason pretty accurately the teams that get through the Swiss bracket and who gets through into playoffs. But you're not determining seeding that well. And I think we've seen this during Worlds as well, because just of the luck of the draw, there is no way to, particularly because it's the start of the year, rosters change. You're not realistically being able to determine which teams face each. You can't seed the start of year. You can't seed that because the rosters change so much over off season. You can't base that seeding based on last year's results. So you can't change that much based on round 1 for that. So you can get some just random hard draws in round 1. The tiebreaker obviously then leads to FlyQuest facing up against Cloud9 again in round 1 because they were a 3rd seed. FlyQuest were able to choose. Cloud9 were able to choose FlyQuest as their opponent, but because they'd already beat them, they were like, okay, we'll just do that again. And of course, then we get a rematch of Sentinels and Dignitas as well from earlier in the bracket. But because it's only 8 teams, you can't even put a rule in place saying like, oh, you can't face a team which you faced in the Swiss stage, because at that point you're denying so many of the matchups that it is quite easy to get ineligible draws. So basically, low team Swiss bracket just has very hard time determining between the seeds that you get out of the bracket.
Well, thankfully for me, I don't have to put some bullshit. We're in hindsight. There's no hindsight. I said before it even began. In fact, I told people before Swiss ever came to League of Legends, you go back on the show, Summoning Insight, to before 2024 Worlds or whatever it was. I told people Swiss system is fucking hot ass and it will suck for the following reasons. You get random draws that are bullshit. One person gets a super hard draw, one person gets an easy draw. At the end of the day, the result is both go to the playoffs if they win them. Like, there's not even like a proportionality to it. There's a million factors I don't like. So one, I would never have run this format. That's the simplest answer of all, Nymaera. This is actually something, again, where you could see coming in there might be a tiebreaker at some point in one area of this particular thing. So I don't even think that makes sense. I don't like any format, by the way, that ends with a tiebreaker that can't be played as a match. I already think I would eliminate that. That's one of the reasons why me and Monty push GSL groups. There are no ties. It's just a little bracket. And so you know exactly where you are before and after every single game. You know what you have to do to win, to get through. You know what you have to do to get eliminated. It's so simple. There's nothing complicated. Because another thing that is fucking shit about this format, I think this is almost the worst format I've ever seen, is one, it has all the worst parts of Swiss, like you get some bullshit draw, but you're also, because it's such a small Swiss, you only play 3 matches. The sample size is absurdly small. And that basically means, by the way, what actually probably will determine a lot you're placing in this one is like a game 3, a single game 3 in a series. So I think it's so all over the place to do it this way. I would never run this format ever again if I were them. I think it was such a mistake to do it. Don't think it worked at all. They even end up having to have a last place fucking tiebreak BO1 between Liquid and Dignitas because otherwise it wasn't even 6 teams to the playoffs. This whole format has failed. Here's what I would genuinely ask them. Am I missing it? What's the upside of this format? Like I can't see what you're gaining over any past format we've run.
I suppose their argument would be best of 3s. So then the question is, would you prefer, I mean, in this case, would you prefer best of 1 LEC system or best of 3 flawed Swiss system from LCS?
I still don't understand why they start late. Why can't we just start earlier and just have BO3? Like I'm not even a round robin fan pro, but if I can't have the GSL groups, just do BO a round robin, 1 round of BO3. Just play 7 games or whatever, you know.
And that's
double up if you need to, whatever it takes.
And that's basically what happened was it Spring Split for EU, which ended up having that last year? I think it was, where we just had best of 3 single round robin. Yeah, I mean, I think best of 3 single round robin is, look, best of 1 isn't real League of Legends. I'm glad we have best of 3s.
Especially not in Fearless, mate. In Fearless especially, it just isn't.
Yeah, and I think particularly when you look at some of the flippy best of 1s, it just feels really awful. So I'm glad that we have best of 3s. That's a positive thing. Now, of course, then you'd say, well, why? I mean, do we have to have best of 3 Swiss? Why is it this the only way that we can get best of 3s? This is also a problem of just like the crammed international calendar, where I think we noted this for the LEC scheduling earlier, right? Where it feels like, okay, you got 12 teams and you've got to get them all to play an amount of games against each other. How the hell do you accommodate that many game days in the amount of time you have between start of the year and then first stand? Which is not a great amount of time. I mean, with 8 teams, you have a lot more room for maneuver. And I do think that with 8 teams, single best of 3s, that would have been, how many series would that have been? So that's, well, each team's got to play, 7 best of 3s. That is a lot of games to fit in with the amount of time that they played it. And even if you give it an extra week, maybe they felt that it would be a very crammed schedule, especially if they're only playing 2 days on a weekend. To me, a lot of these formats, they just seem so janky because they're trying to fit things into such a small amount of time.
Exactly, you've nailed it. They set arbitrary conditions, and then within that, you can't do anything. Here's what I'll never understand. You're all paid to be professional League of Legends players. Why can't we just have LCK and LPL formats where you play more days? What is this? Like, that's the best part. In those leagues, they start from what is the highest level of league. It's to have the best teams play each other and have them playing BO3s. And then they figure the schedule out around that. And for some reason, as you say, in the West, we do this weird thing where it's like, the priests have gone away into the room, the smoke's coming out. They've determined there will be 3 days this week we'll play. And then within that, we have to just make the schedule work. It's like, I don't get it, mate. Like, we're professional players. Can't we just have an extra play day, you know?
To me, this screams as though they have broadcast day limits where they only have a certain amount of days where they can work with, or they don't want to have, like, maybe they just don't want to have a certain amount of broadcast days. But that sucks from like a competitive standpoint. But I mean, in this regular season in Swiss, we've had 12 best of 3s and a best of 1. Like, if you're going to, that's such a small amount of games. Now, I mean, Swiss makes it compact. We have made this before, but it feels like just such a kind of like a losing argument in terms of like, you're going to determine which seeds get into playoffs, but you just don't get that many games. And I'm glad we have best of 3s. I am. But to me, this just raises an eyebrow in terms of maybe they just felt like they only had a certain amount of broadcast days that they could put on due to whatever reasons. They started late. They only had 3 weekends of play. Right? They had one game on. They had the they had basically the extra best of one after the game days on the round 3 of the Swiss. To me, this just screams couldn't they just couldn't get more studio days. That's what it screams, and that's such an unsatisfying way to put it, because you'd like to see, especially with an 8-team league, the whole point about having 8 teams is that it allows you to play more games and more best of 3s for less amount of teams, and hopefully you have more condensed talent to have better quality of games. But clearly, they haven't got the amount of broadcast days, at least that's what I would assume, to put on a best of 1 round robin.
And then obviously the joke, as you say, is the marquee matchup is the one we just saw. We just saw the 3-game Cloud9 versus Flycat, but we're just going to run it back. We're just going to play it again. So what are your thoughts on that match? What can we look forward to this time?
Okay, well, I think that Blabber is on insanely good form. And I think that, so what was quite funny is that Sven was on broadcast and he was talking about how Dom, as he came into the team, had really brought in the jungle propaganda in terms of, when you fight for the level 6 Scuttle Crab, you get level 6 for your jungler first and you can win that dragon at first spawn or whatever. You can just always win that. And it sounds a little bit joke. It's like, it's jungle propaganda. Legitimately, Cloud9 are playing so damn well through jungle advantage right now. It helps that they have really solid lanes to go back up their jungler, but like this reminds me of like 2021 and that kind of era of Blabber, where he was just very, very good at bullying out early matchups and getting wins through that. Blabber's had a bit of a downswing in terms of his individual impact for the last while now. I'm trying to remember the last time where people respected Blabber as, potentially best player in the league, potentially best jungler.
Problem is, it'll have been before Inspired, so it was a few years back now, mate.
And now, and that's actually now you've mentioned that, that's really annoyed me, because Lion's just not.
Oh, they're relevant.
They're going to fall apart. So now we don't even now Blabber's back in form in what seems to be quite a jungle centric meta in terms of can you get your jungler ahead and rolling through the plays that we don't get to see Inspired versus Blabber on even teams. Basically, I know that Cloud9 did beat Lion as well in the Swiss, and that was quite an interesting series. But just basically the rest of the team was just so much better from Cloud9. It didn't feel like a fair fight, really. And while I think that Griffin is another good jungler, and he's a very creative jungler, and I think that FlyQuest in their series versus Cloud9, they brought up stuff like the Senna support, which no one else in the world has played, which, they're thinking about the drafts. We talked about this in the last episode as well, in terms of Griffin playing stuff like the Volibear jungle, which is, again, not stuff which anyone else is really playing. I think Cloud9 as a team understand how to play around pushing lanes and support their jungler better than any other team, and they transition into being currently the best team fighting team in the LCS as well. I think that APA, best mid laner in the league. I think that Quad has not had the same impact he's had last year just yet. I do actually interestingly think that Darkwings is up there in the top ranks as well from Sentinels. He's really impressed me because I haven't been paying as close attention to LCS because of just time on LPL and LEC in the last few years. But that guy's kind of crops up from nowhere when I've been watching through the games and thinking, damn, this guy's actually very good. But he is second to APA, who's been really, really good. The only way I think that Cloud9 start to drop games is, one, they end up picking just some really quite janky drafts with stuff like they lost the game 2 against FlyQuest when they had Nidalee with very limited CC. Very few teams can play Nidalee with no CC. Unless your name is Canyon, basically don't try it. You don't get the Nidalee license like that for free, really. The only way I think FlyQuest win this series is somehow they sneak an early game with Cloud9, messing up. FlyQuest get a really intricate draft and they pull ahead. And they get to like game 4 and 5, and we see whether APA's champion pool becomes an issue. Because I'm very interested to see what happens with Cloud9 when APA isn't on choice champions in game 4 and 5, when he's not on, Azir, Talir, the Nico he pulled out as well, right? This guy is obviously really good in his choice champions. We've always known that. The question is, do we get to see APA put off his comfort champions? I know there's a big meme about it, and actually does have a fairly significant champion pool. But if you get to game 5, for instance, can FlyQuest take it with their quite creative drafting? That's the only way I really see them taking this series, based off what we saw from Swiss.
I do think that was like a throwback series from Blabber. That reminded me of the old Blabber that had like crazy, almost delusional self-confidence. He could just diff anyone. Also, the other player that the whole time, even when they had the hard times last year, that I've never given up on ever in this team is Thanatos, mate. I think that guy is actually a fucking stud. He's another one of those players where I wonder, will they ever get the invitation to come back to Korea? I feel like he could do it, mate. Mechanically, he's really good. In lane, he is fucking monster too. Like, I feel like so much, and the difference was, he used to, at the beginning of the time, when he first came into that JoJo lineup, he had a similar problem as our boy Forton had in the LEC. It's like, oh, you're mechanically good, you're good in lane, but then you have the Alfari thing. Like, what happens after that, though? Can you ever do things? Mate, it looks like this year he's taken a step up in that regard. Like, now his actual movements on the map look half decent. Like, it looks like he's making some decent decisions. So I think that guy's a stud too, mate. I think he's a very good player. I'd like to see him play internationally.
Yeah, and I mean, he's up against someone like Gakos, right? Who's like, typically the way you beat someone who is like from the LCK CL is that you destabilize the map around them and then you try and just fuck with their game sense a little bit and say, so for instance, this is something that's applied to Morgan a little bit on Team Liquid, who, you know, he's had a pretty good, he's been stable enough in the last few years for LCK, I suppose, and there's some memes about him, but I don't think Morgan is as bad as some people have sometimes memed about him in the past. The way that he started to fall apart is that he's integrating into a new team and you destabilize the map and then he doesn't know how to play on side lanes, and you can get kind of some free kills, and that's often one of the ways when Team Liquid start to fall behind. That's one of the ways that they end up losing games. Problem with Thanatos is that, you know, now he's actually put in some decent time into NA, and he's playing very well in individual matchups. I don't even think that you get under his skin that well. He's playing out individual matchups too well. And of course, the problem with someone like FlyQuest is that the thing which they are missing is that experience. And that's not going to come through easily. Now, like I said, the main word which comes to me from them is creativity. I think that they're actually very good at finding aggressive angles with creative picks, particularly from jungle. I was also quite interested to see Gakos play Jace top as well. And on the whole, LCS has been one of the regions where I've actually looked at their draft, not in the way before. Sometimes I look at their drafts and go, I don't know what you're doing. Now I'm looking at their drafts and thinking, oh, actually, that's an interesting way to explore the meta, because I think that a lot of teams have been quite lazy on that. But I don't think you're going to be able to get ahead of Thanatos in the individual lane, and I don't think you're going to be able to destabilize the map on him too much. So that's going to be a big problem for FlyQuest, because if you're not going to do that, then you just have to straight up teamfight Cloud9. And as we were just saying, they are the best teamfighting team in the league. They are. They're just quite bluntly so. So FlyQuest, they're going to have to do something very, very creative, because that they have to have some kind of X factor. It's not going to be an easy series. And maybe if they do that early on and they force it to a later series and then all the power picks and the comfort picks are out, maybe then that can be their X factor, but it's a slim chance.
And then there was also another crazy, like, weird moment, which was for Sentinels. It was actually Golden Blue, their coach, tweeted this, where basically Aatrox's pick for Impact, he basically went Guardian, which is like not only like a mistake, obviously, in the room. Isn't that like technically the worst one you could even get?
There is
essentially
no
stopped him right out. You just fucked right out of the lane, yeah.
So basically, Aatrox tends to go Grasp in lane. Well, ages ago used to go Conqueror, but it's been Grasp Aatrox for a very long time for like that first auto attack, tap of damage, and then the healing, and then the sustain. It's in the same tree as Guardian, though. So it's on the green tree. It's on Resolve. He just probably, I think the rest of his runes were actually completely fine as far as I remember checking them in game. So he just clicked the wrong keystone. So he clicked Guardian, which is just another green blob keystone. I've done that occasionally randomly. And basically, Guardian, you need a teammate nearby to activate that. So it is functionally the worst keystone you can have in the game. Spellbook, at least you can get an Ignite. Something like, you know, First Strike or Airy or whatever. You can at least get something. Even Phase Rush has occasionally been used on bruisers in the past to run away from trades. That is quite literally the worst rune you could have had in the entire game. And it completely just fucked the game. I mean, you don't have that the same lane pressure which you would have had, which Aatrox does need to have a good laning phase. If Aatrox falls behind, that champion is just giga useless. He just can't do anything. So that felt like it kind of just ruined an entire game. And I know that one of the things on that tweet was actually how much it was player error, but how much do you want something like that to affect a game? Because I think that game just became 2x harder.
So I'll give you the other classic example. Obviously, it's rare this happens, but the other instance where I think people do think maybe there's a way you can have a reboot, but you give like a minor punishment. The other example of a thing that ruins the whole game is if the jungler doesn't take his jungle item. That's another classic one. Now, again, there's no way that will ever be done out of choice. That is just, you know, someone brain farted and then think, right, in that scenario, I understand the logic goes, you don't want this to be where no questions asked, people just do this and then see things like what your draft's going to be or what the fucking early path thing. Obviously, in theory, someone could be a dickhead. But I think if you have extreme cases like that, if you can figure out some meaningful punishment, someone even had an interesting idea, like maybe you just mute that player's comms for the first minute and you have to restart the game, something like that. You know, something to be a concession. Because I do feel like even though you could say, yes, you should have clicked it right and been a professional, that's even the sort of win, mate, where if you're on the other team, you're like, that wasn't a real game. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't feel like you actually properly beat them.
And then, of course, they went on to lose. The Sentinels then went on to go just win the damn series anyway. So then it feels like, well, okay, the one game that's actually got to really hurt for Team Liquid too, being like, well, the only game we won was against Guardian Aatrox, which just feels like you get a free win in the top lane at that point, which is probably absolutely unsatisfying for them as well. I mean, Impact even played okay in some of the early stages of that game, but if you have Grasp, it's just such a different laning phase. You have the extra damage, the extra healing. There was a dive which came onto him, I believe, because the wave was crashing into him. You know, you'd imagine that just couldn't have happened with the Grasp really, in the same way. And yeah, personally, I feel like that impacted the game too much. I think that you either just you give them a warning, then maybe you have something in the rulebook in terms of actually just in terms of this happens repeatedly, you get fines or potentially docked points or game wins or something like that. Maybe that's the way that you have to deal with it. But realistically, you know what the runes are meant to be other than the Aatrox. This is such an egregious example. If they just went, hey, can I change nothing else about my runes, just change Guardian to Grasp, any player in the league would be like, well, yeah, that would make sense. And it just feels like Team Liquid just get a free win off of that, and it sucks because, you know, if this had actually ended up affecting a closer series where Sentinels, you know, they could have won game 1 then lost game 2 instead, it would have changed the entire result of the series.
And then the other big story in the LCS is this: Shopify Rebellion, which, remember, actually on paper had an interesting roster. You look at their roster, you think at a minimum they're going to be top 4. Obviously, they've banked everything on this mid laner Zinni, that he's going to come in and be like a stud. And if that happens, by the way, the rest of the roster looks pretty decently. It's like, considering where Shopify's at as a team, it's not a bad set of pickups they've got. The bot lane even has some interesting potential there. They've got veterans elsewhere on the team. Essentially, a lot of it was gambled on this, but it can't have gone worse. I can tell you, by the way, as someone who does betting, even until the last week, they were favoured in most of the games, man. Most of the money was going in on actually the Shopify side of the equation. And they've not only lost all 3 of the matches, and admittedly, yes, they did play FlyQuest, but Team Liquid ended up not even being that good, by the way. They didn't even win a game. They went 0-6. Yep. This is some nightmare fuel shit.
And the real disaster of this is that Zinni was bad. Zinni was probably worst mid in the league. I think he was worst mid in the league, and this guy was meant to be. Apparently, Chronicler was called. Some of the casters were asking Chronicler about him because he came from challenges. He's like, he's going to run the whole league. I was watching the montage videos and being like, okay, this guy's really, really good. Just doesn't look like it. He just hasn't looked like it. There's been a pretty good track record now of very good solo queue players, very good challenges players who don't get it together for a while. And I think that Zinni is another one of these players for now. I mean, one of the things that they were talking about on broadcast was that it was Quid who was in a similar situation as well, where his first 4 to 6 games were not great in LCS. And then we return back to the format because they only now get to play 6 games this entire split. Thinking about it again, they play 6 games the entire split. That's pretty fucked up, actually, because you don't get a chance to settle this guy in nearly as much. And, you know, he tried a load of different picks, you know, the Anivia and stuff like that, which wasn't really meta in the last few seasons. So that's something new that he would have had to pick up as well. And yeah, sadly for him, I thought that, you know, contracts moving away from Palafox to someone like Zinni would be a big difference for him. Then he gets knocked out by his old mid laner anyway, and Palafox is the guy who's saying like, oh, I was the problem, haha, stuff like that. And I'm like, well, you know, in another world, that would have been the killer, but credit to Palafox, he actually ends up taking the win versus the old team or whatever,
absolutely.
Which has got to feel pretty good for him. And Zinni, I just wish he had more time on stage, but they just don't have the games in this amount of format to get him settled in.
By the way, there's another problem for the format in itself. You play 3 matches and then you're just done. Like, you've got to have some time to actually get going into the game. I'm not even a big fan of group stage, but give me something. Give me like 6 or 5 or something. You know, give me some actual play. Because also the other problem with that is, even though you're getting like best of 3, each match is 1 day though. So I've got 3 days of play there, basically. I mean, if I'm bad on 2 out of the 3 days, on this case 3 out of 3, I'm just done already. I'm toast. I don't get anything more than 3 days to show I've actually got skills. The only positive is this. Because they've had to get this fucking guy from Korea and get him the visa, they probably now will still give him a bit more time. I imagine he'll get to play the next split and they won't just boot him out immediately, etc. But I tell you what, if this had been an NA play, mate, you'd probably just get shown the paper, your marching papers, and some other guy comes in the roster.
This is a pretty good split, actually, for people who've been kicked off of rosters and doing really well on their next team, thinking about it. Because, Palafox at least gets the win versus the old team. You've had that for APA, who's having a great time of things right now. Impact, of course, coming back on Sentinels as well. He's had a pretty good time of things too. It's basically just like, it's basically just poor Inspired. He's just like had the worst end of it. He thought, oh damn, it's great for all these players moving on for the next team. Everyone's doing well with it except for poor Inspired.
Yeah, but that works too, because in his case, it's like he kicked his whole team and then some of them beat him. So it still works, and they just stayed behind.
Someone's got to take the L at the end of it. But yeah, sad for Zinni. Like, he was the worst mid in the whole LCS this split, which sucks because this guy was meant to be the crowning jewel. So what do you do in, we talked about it being quite a jungle centric meta, but I also think like mid lane has an unparalleled crazy amount of access to the map right now, and there are a lot of counter matchups you can play in mid lane too to get ahead of it. If everyone blind picks something like a Ryze, you can lock in something like a Nivea or Cassiopeia, which are mechanical laning champions, and you want to get the most out of them. Which you'd think actually for a challengers player, you'd expect that the laning matchup centric mid meta will be really good for him. And it just hasn't looked like that. This guy's just not been able to get lane leads which matter enough, and then also respect the map well enough to use any of that lead to do anything.
I mean, if it's me, if I went to all the hassle of getting this guy, he was even a guy I believe people implied was contested with some other teams too. Other people was looking at this guy and thinking he could be a star.
I think KC were looking.
I think it was implied it was between the Kiahu and him. Yeah, absolutely. You don't just give up after 3 fucking match days. You have to give it another split and believe that your eye test was right and that whatever you saw that when you were putting the team together worked. And also, you are Shopify Rebellion. Like, you're not a team I think that can go and just try. You can't just take another crack at getting some other top up and coming talent. There's probably no one available at this point in time. So I don't. In my opinion, you don't abandon it. You go next for the next split. You hope it all turns around. As you said also, by the way, since this is the extenuating circumstances, that is a pure Korean coming all the way to the West and playing in an LCS team, there is also, unlike if it's just a normal player shit the bed, there is also a world where maybe actually this is some crazy performance anxiety in the official games, and actually he overcomes that and becomes a really good player. Like, I don't believe these people have totally no eye test, they're idiots. Like, there's probably something to it. So I'd at least give him the next split personally.
Yeah, and it's just quite funny that both him and Saint, who are both fairly new prospects to LCS, have both had this. There were jokes all the way in the past, right? There was a bad track record for NA and Korean prospects where it just felt like people came over and it was something about the practice environment, about the solo queue, about living in a different country, where just the skill vampires came to get them. Somehow the skill just ended up getting drained away, was the old summoning insightism, the Montyism, really. And yeah, it just seems like both these players have not really showed up very well. And I was very surprised because I thought that the level of mid lane talent in LCS on paper was meant to be very good, actually, this split. I thought that Palafox would be not great, and actually he's been better than actually two of the more hype mid laners coming into it. And instead it's someone like Darkwings, who's actually fairly up close towards the top of the table for me. And as I said, APA, he's had a massive revival, a great split from him so far, which has completely flipped my expectations of that role, which I thought it was going to be stacked, but it's actually the different players than I expected who've come out on top.
It's also why I do think that Inspired actually did make a mistake doing that move. I already thought that anyway, because first of all, I get the money side of it. You want to get paid. You're the best player. That all makes sense. Maybe you even want to say over your teammates. Think about how contentious last year was with some of the people he's playing with. But my problem is this: when you're at the level Inspired's at, you've already won the domestic championships. You've already been the best player in the West. All that. What you want at this point in time is one of those iconic Worlds runs. You want the crazy, I made it to the finals run, or I actually beat, I won't take a massive one. Let's say something like you beat a BLG in a quarterfinal game. That's the sort of thing you're aiming for. And the problem is, in that scenario, I think for your mid laner, your motherfucking mid laner, you have to go with a known property. You know what I mean? Like, if you wanted to play with a Korean talent, you had to get with a Quid or something like that this time, mate. Look, I get that Quad wasn't as good last year. Maybe you had to get with someone like Quid, or you had to get a Kiahu in your team. You've gambled on this guy. I don't know why you go with a pure gamble one, because if anything, right, he went through this with Jojo. Jojo was a prospect. He came in domestically. He was all right. It took him a while to get his international game together and get the extra steps. So I just think that's the weirdest part on the Inspired one. It's like sight unseen. You're just gambling that it'll work between you and this new talent and just hoping he gets you like a 9 out of 10 performance. I think you're just taking too big a gamble in your career there, mate. I'd have gone for more of a known quantity and maybe a tiny bit less money, but it also depends what you want in your career, right?
Yeah, and I mean, last year Saint was decent. It's not like he had like a bad 2025. People seem to respect him again. I've had to retrospectively go through it and then look through the lens of, oh, I already know the results and whatever. But yeah, I suppose there was some data on it, but then I don't know how much Inspired. I don't know how much play stuff like practice and kind of trials went for that. I have no idea what happened in the off season for Inspired. Obviously, the team of FlyQuest kind of fell apart. But yeah, I mean, even with that, you would have expected Sane after last year to have been doing better than he is right now, which that's gonna hurt Inspired a lot. And of course, Dokla coming in unexpectedly to that team for Lyon. I mean, I think that he on paper he's fine for that roster, but realistically, as we've been saying, that team is just not performing right now, and they're starting in lower bracket, right? So they're going to have to deal with one of the teams falling down from above. And I'm just trying to think if I would really favor them versus anyone that really falls down into the bracket. I think that, yeah, I mean, what happens at that point if they just go out immediately after one series? I mean, do they actually...
They've also got the bomber that they, because of the way their bracket ended up turning out, they in theory get the stronger team that drops straight down. So it's actually quite likely to go out immediately.
Yeah, I don't actually know whether it drops down based on highest remaining seed or whether it's drops down from one side of the bracket. Like, do they get the loser of C9 Fly, or do they just get the lowest remaining seed?
There's no information elsewhere, so as far as I know, you always just drop normally bracket on the first one, then you just
swap on
the second one.
Okay, well, if they have to place presumably FlyQuest, that drops that, they're so boned.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I feel like they're cooked already. So there's another thing. Inspired is going to have such crazy egg on his face, even though, listen, I acknowledge, yes, he obviously didn't get the exact roster he wanted. Like, he also did want the Zamundo guy, etc., and they were supposed to have it the way it was going to be. So it's not quite the same, but at the same time, I also know how fans are. Fans don't... Here's the thing about fans. This is where they are on some WWE shit. Most fans, I also just don't care about being fair, mate. If they just think there's a funny angle, like, lol, you left a team and you thought you were better than them and then they lost. They're not really thinking about you, Inspired. They're just thinking about someone who thought they were better than them in their life. And they're like, oh, see, you were wrong. You should have given me a second. It's on some fucking personal shit. So I think people also just want him to be wrong in a way and believe he should have kept the FlyQuest band together or something like that, you know?
And this is where it turns out we bring it back to the format a lot. Well, we're just not going to see this team able to develop and see if they, Saint can work through his issues, or whether the team can work through their own anti-synergies and stuff like that too. I suppose that also applies to a team like Disguised as well, because they've only just got their jungler back, right? Because they started out with Kizno, and then Kryra came back in. I've been impressed with Saja. That guy's been really good. So I'm not actually sure how to pronounce his name, but their AD carry has been really, really good. But changing your jungler after a few splits, I think as far as I'm aware, they didn't get that many scrims with Kryra either, because I'm not sure if they knew whether he'd be playing or not. So that's another problem for them, really, where we just don't get enough time to really see how they get to kind of settle into these rosters. I mean, at least we get some best of fives now, and it means that it won't be just best of one jitters. Maybe they get to work through a best of five, but we're going to have to see that development live on stage rather than kind of off the rift and kind of developing between weeks.
Now, if you're like me, then you're probably in the gym, hustling, listening to that music, Ennio Morricone, like Ecstasy of Gold, just thinking of whatever your goals are. Or maybe like me, you're nerdy, listening to a lot of podcasts, listening, we knew he's talking about that, biased, obviously. Well, I'll probably say this on the show, thinking of all that stuff. Or maybe you're out there cooking up some food the way just you like it, but you want to be able to hear what's going on around. Well, Raycon's got you covered, whatever you might be like. Also, I was sort of using an NLP technique. I just kept saying, you like me, you like me, you like me. So now that you like me, you're going to listen to what I have to say, because I think Raycon products are pretty good for the price point. And you can obviously get with the new ones, the open ones. A normal earbud blocks everything out because you put it in, don't you? But the downside there is, what if someone calls your name? Or what if a car honks before it runs in the side of your head? There's all sorts of things could go wrong, aren't they? Well, the beauty of these Raycon ones is they sit just outside your ear canal so that you get the clear sound still, but you can actually hear what's going on as well. So the awareness element is right there. By the way, also really good for fitness scenarios, so you don't have that awkward moment where you're doing something and then you feel that tapping. What the fuck? Oh, phew. Yeah, I'm going to be finished with listening. Like, bloody hell. Like, you can hear the guy coming, but I can... I don't know why I made it like I'm doing theatre in the mind here, boys. Remember, some people on podcasts aren't watching the screen. It's all good. I do all the sounds as well. I was born to actually be on BBC Radio in like the
you're a
1960s.
Foley artist.
I know, but sadly, I'm in the age of visual, so whatever. Some would say I do have a face for radio. Not me. I think my face looks straight fire. How rude. How incredibly rude of you. So anyway, they also are really light. They have this like special ear hook thing that like rotates around so they stay in. They won't come out and pop out really easily. Depending on what you're doing, maybe you're out in the gym, maybe you're around the house, whatever. You don't have to worry about them falling out, which is one of the annoying things when you have bods, right? And they have over 3 million customers at Raycon, and they managed to live up to the hype. They're usually about half the price of what you normally get for like big brand earbuds that everyone's talking about on all the shows. So I think the price point is really well done. And if you don't like them, they have a 30-day guarantee. So, and I always do the usual. They have 8 hours of playtime, 36 hours with the chair charging case. So the Essential Open earbuds are here to help you go for gold. Go to buyraycon.com/LFN Open, all one word, to get 15% off. Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring. That's buyraycon.com/LFN Open to get 15% off. Okay, we will now move to the LPL. Now, fucking hell. Speaking of rotating hooks that mean I'm always in, I can't fucking quit this region, bro. What is this? What is this? Every time. By the way, one thing I've learned about the LPL, there are no guaranteed matchups in the LPL. There are none. And it never stops. Yeah. Again, please, I want to get off fucking Mr. LPL's wild ride. It's too much. It's too much. Like, you know what? You'd said it before. So we'll start with the worst aspects of it. Remember the cock tease of IG winning those games earlier? Well, so maybe they can do it.
Wow, they beat JDG.
They lost in 4 games to NIP. By the way, let me just put this out there. NIP aren't even good. But I tell you what, they're better than IG. So fucking God bless you. What do you think of this, Nymaera? My lord.
Well, what's a recap? So anyone's Legend finished first in regular season. We finished off our group Ascend, and we had our bottom 2 teams with like top esports looking really quite good. So what that meant was that we had this ugly duckling of IG from group Ascend being like, okay, this team, if anyone's going to lose to a team from group Perseverance, so for those of you, again, that aren't aware with LPL, we have a 3-group system for this split only, where we have like our ST group, which is group Ascend, group Perseverance, which are our next 4 teams, then group Nirvana, which are like our bottom teams. So we have basically the bottom 2 teams from Ascend fight off against, because effectively we have play-ins to playoffs. This is not playoffs. This is what's called the Knights Rivals or the Knights Road or the Knights Path, something flowery like that. Effectively, it's a play-in to playoffs. And it starts with 2 qualification matches where we have the Ascend teams versus the best teams from the group just below them. I thought IG were going to be in trouble as soon as I saw that Top Esports went 5 games with WE, and I'm like, oh, like that's actually like a problem, because WE did technically finish 2nd in group Perseverance because NIP won the tiebreaker with them. NIP had a pretty good end to the regular season, but at the end of the day, they're a mid-table team. And I thought, okay, mid-table, in this middle group, yeah, I think that they play pretty well around Guon on jungle carries. I think Care, of course, the guy that came over from FPX, this guy, if he's on form, actually pretty good. And I thought, well, okay, NIP looked pretty good, but we'll see how the first matchup goes. And the first matchup between Top Esports and WE, which was meant to be, the best team in this bracket versus one which was a little bit lower down. And that went to 5 games, and it was a banger. Like, we had to go to game 5 for that. And we ended up getting a Ken and Vladimir carry top lane matchup, but 369 had to carry out of his mind to get Top Esports across the line there too. It was very back and forth. W, I think, really showed up, but Top Esports beat them. So I thought, okay, if Top Esports, who are a significantly stronger team than IG, are getting brought to the brink like this, IG are in big shit. And it turns out they were, and they ended up losing 3-1 to NIP, where basically the one game where IG won in that series was when NIP played the world's riskiest draft with 0 tanks. They had a Varus top lane, and NIP fucked up once and the game was over. And then for the rest of the series, they were still playing like lane pressure champions where Sobro was just getting completely obliterated. And poor Rookie was like, I gotta roam up to his lane again. I gotta get something working here. And like, Rookie couldn't be everywhere at once, effectively. Rookie wasn't the problem this series. but he just couldn't be the solution at the other side of this too. And I have to say, I've been relatively impressed by NIP, but I just didn't think they were going to be like a top team. I did think maybe they'd beat IG just because IG were looking really bad in some ways. And the game which really sold it for me was Assume, who is a notable Draven player, got something like a 5,000 gold lead by end of game on Draven just by dunking on poor IG by getting ahead in the early game. So that means that IG are now playing for their lives. So as we're recording this, they're fighting for their lives in effectively the play in round 3 against the teams which are making their way through the lower bracket. It's not technically a lower bracket as they start. Oh, it is the lower bracket, but they technically start there. And the interesting thing about that, IG might have actually just been saved by the results which happened earlier today. So we had LNG beat TT. Now, we like LNG. I think they're a good team. I think that 1xN is fucking phenomenal. That guy is a savant. In fact, I made a prediction earlier today when I was on my caster as well on my stream. I think one day 1xN will be the best AD carry in the LPL. At one point, this guy has that special stuff. If he gets a good team, if he actually gets a good run of form, and continues on developing the way he is, I actually think 1xN can become the best AD carry in the LPL. It might take a while. Maybe some other bigger names have to step aside for that to happen, but this guy has that special stuff. And they beat TT, a little bit labored, sure. And basically what would happen is, because LNG were the better team coming out of Nirvana, if EDG won the other game, it would have been LNG versus IG, who I think are a weaker team than WE right now. But fucking OMG, just a team which was probably worst team in the league about half a month ago, a couple of weeks ago, ended up upsetting EDG, who we thought we were pretty good, 3-1 today in a messy ass series, which now means that OMG are actually against IG for the last spot in playoffs there too. Now that means WE LNG playoff, both of which are probably better than IG and OMG, and one of them is now going out because of this upset of OMG versus EDG, and the seeding there. And I have to say, I think IG can beat OMG. I don't think it's a done deal, but I think IG might have just been given like a massive lifeline because for those of you that don't know the format for this as well, if you don't get into playoffs, you are in Group Nirvana, the lower group next split. It's only 2 groups next split, and it's 6 teams in the bottom one, and I believe it's 8 in the top one. But if you make it into the top 8 teams and into playoffs, you go into Group Ascend, and now suddenly one of Team WE or LNG is not going to get the expected results. I think both of them probably expected off of this bracket to get in towards playoffs. And it does mean it would be very, very funny that somehow OMG, this team with like a completely just banged together roster, which took, for those of you that don't know this as well, OMG had 7 months off last year where they lost out in Split 2. They finished off in bottom 2 in Split 2, and they just were basically eliminated from the LPL. They could somehow squeak their way into playoffs, and IG would have to be in there too. So there's a lot of drama. That's all going to be found out tomorrow. But if OMG hadn't upset EDG, I think IG would be absolutely sweating bullets right now.
Yeah, by the way, on the IG thing, I mean, it's why at the beginning of the year I did say, like, best will in the world, this doesn't look like a good roster. It doesn't look like good GMing. Like, first of all, I think the rumor even was that they were uncertain would the Shy return, basically. And obviously him and Rookie at this point in time are just fucking star-crossed lovers who must play together forever, no matter what the case is. So, like, the Saboro guy, by the way, is significantly worse than the Shy. And just generally, I don't think he's ever looked good. Like, I didn't even think he was that good in the Demacia Cup, by the way. The difference is...
funny in Demacia Cup. He wasn't good.
The difference is Fortic, who absolutely has been a complete fraud, even though he wasn't actually the worst player in this series, he only looked good in the Demacia Cup. That was like the complete fool's gold there, where he just seemed like he was decent. And it's even worse. I said it earlier, but there's one more to add in. So this is who you could have had if you're IG as your ADC. You could have had 1xN. The rumor goes he didn't want to deal with his agency. You could have had Diablo, who's on BFX. For whatever reason, you didn't go with him or he chose to stay in Korea. You could also have had Elk, by the way. Elk was available. It's rumored he could have joined as well. Any of these choices sound good. The only one that sounds shit is Fortic. And by the way, if I'd have said that and then he'd have smurfed the whole split, I'd have gone, okay, fair play. You were right. I was wrong. You saw something I didn't know, or maybe there's something going on in his career. I just don't understand this move. I don't get it. So it's such a bizarre move. Like, I have no clue how this move happens to come about, because it looks like you just chose the only wrong choice of those 4.
It's because Rookie and Fotic have played together before, I'd imagine. They've stuck together through a few things. They were on V5 together when they were really good in like 22 particularly. They were on NIP in 24 rather. That's when they ended up joining together too. So I can only just imagine Rookie just likes being on a team with him, but we keep returning back to this across different players where, because BDD's up there too, Rookie's in there too. Some players just don't know how to choose good rosters for themselves, and Rookie is just one of those players where now, as far as we're aware, I think Mako might be back next split. I think Jue's not been awful, but I don't think it's been like fantastic. Maybe Mako changes some comms about the team. Realistically, they need the Shy back, and I think actually best case scenario for you, LNG don't make group ascend, WE beat them, and you get 1xn. I don't care about the agency stuff. Just pick up this guy. Just get him. Get like 1xn Mako, get the Shy back, and that's actually then a title contending team, perhaps, if you go off of form from 2025. There's a chance with some of the top teams looking a bit ropey, you actually could sneak your way into some top ranks at that point. But this team is just not going to be fit for purpose, and that's really, really sad. It's just another kind of wasted split for Rookie, who's trying to be that guy that's a second jungler everywhere on the map. But the problem is there's no pressure anyway, so they can't do anything from that. Wei's been all right. I think Wei's been fine, but even then, he's a little bit of a dice roll himself in the way that both him and Jirja kind of both have that chaotic nature to them. So now we're at the point where, oh my god, we could actually have OMG threatening them with this one guy, Reo, who's come out as a rookie jungler, been an absolute firecracker, sometimes awful, sometimes fantastic, and definitely a player to watch. And I think IG are favored versus them, but it's not a done deal there.
For me, not only if you're a superstar player who has pull, which especially in the IG org, this guy Rookie clearly has had, because he basically is like the foundation of their entire fucking org. The problem I have is this. Once you identify you yourself aren't that great at making like the calls on who to get, the actual answer then is obvious, but I guess maybe the joke is maybe this extends that you don't have a good taste in this. You get to a GM that's good and you go, you know what, you take care of it, man. I just play mid lane, you sort it out. Like in G2, Caps doesn't ever have to sit around thinking about who he wants in the team. They will populate the team around him with really good players. And if that doesn't work out, he knows that there'll be good players coming down the pipeline. I think one of the most underrated details of Faker's career is that he stayed put in what is one of the de facto best orgs in the history of esports. Like, he actually, in some senses, himself was born with the old silver spoon in the mouth. Like, it's why I always thought it was actually crazy that Reckless kept leaving Fnatic all over the... Mate, if you stayed in that team, they were gonna... You would have been the man forever. They never would have kicked you. They'd have always kept building squads around it. And, spoiler, people want to join your teams if you're Faker and Rookie and Reckless. Like, they just do. So I also think that's the other part. It's not just that you fucked up with your own choices. It's that you never ever figured out and had the look in the mirror and went, wait, that sort of suck picking teammates. Why not just let someone else handle that, What
do you think the best managed teams are for rosters? I think that there haven't been a crazy amount, which I think have done very well consistently. But I'm interested to see what Na'Vi do, because they've had a good history in other esports, and they actually look that they've done a good job there. I mean, obviously G2 have picked up a ton of good players over time, and they've done largely very well. I know there's jokes about this season about Roman saying we have the best players in every or whatever. Realistically, they're definitely there for Europe. Then obviously Cloud9 were a talent factory, but there aren't a crazy amount of teams out there. You absolutely know you're getting a good deal with that. But good managed teams within League are absolutely worth their weight in gold.
But this way, I think the LPL's obviously been a nightmare because, first of all, it has been a superstar region where people move between teams and just leave them for dead. And some of the names do just cycle from the absolute top to the absolute bottom. If I had to look at the history of the LPL, I think technically the best managed team was EDG. Think about how many times EDG was able to take out a superstar mid laner or an AD or whatever, and then go to another one and then revamp the roster. And then people will forget, it was only a couple of years ago when they had that leave 4-4. Like, that was actually starting to look good again, mate. They were starting to get in a position to potentially be a good team.
Yeah, 23 spring. Yeah. In fact, actually, that was my first split casting LPL, and people actually forget that, because obviously they won Worlds, and then 22, the roster kind of like, they lost to DRX in the quarterfinals, and that was when they suffered from COVID. It was a 5-game series, and then things kind of fell apart. So they had to rebuild going into 23, and they were actually best team in the regular split before we saw JDG and BLG take off after that point. EDG early on, about halfway through spring split, were probably top 2 in the region before the JDG super team really started to take off and do its massive damage. Yeah, EDG is definitely up there, but obviously nowadays, EDG just bombed out.
I think of the run they had, though, how many years they just kept cycling back up to a top 3. And again, like I said, not with the same pieces. They didn't have some rookie guy who was there. They only had Mako, that was it. Mako was the one guy who was the perma-stay. I also think, by the way, that was even shrewd in itself. Think of the longevity you got out of that play. It did turn out to be one of the great captains.
Yeah, EDG, which makes it even more tragic that since since the roster fell apart and then 24 happened where they had the Doom squad where they were just the worst team in the LPL, they've just not been relevant for 3 years now, which means that another one of the big brands in the LPL has just not delivered on its promises. And right here, they should have been the best team in group perseverance going into this split, and they've ended up just completely fucking it. And now they're going to be in group Nirvana because they lost to OMG, a team which was the worst team in the league like 2 weeks ago. And I tell you what, I have a bone to pick with a certain person on that roster too. Clearlove's coaching record, because he is now he's the coach of EDG, may be one of the worst. He might have one of the worst coaching rosters of any player turned coach ever. He was there for, he was there for a bit after the Worlds win in 2021, and that looked pretty good. And then he presided over the worst EDG roster ever in 2024, and then it wasn't that much better in 25 where things fell apart again. Into bits of 25, and then he went on to JDG last year, where JDG had 7 roster changes. They didn't make anything of their team, and they kind of wasted a lot of players' time on their team, even though they had Pays, they had Scout on that roster too. Like, that team should have been so much better than it was and completely bombed out. And now he's back to EDG, and they've underperformed expectations again. Clearlove is genuinely, I think, one of the worst player coaches in terms of record that we've ever seen.
I mean, unfortunately, it's just one of those tragic things, isn't it? You can never really know what translates to being the coach and what doesn't. So, sadly, yeah. And obviously, in his particular case, here's why it's also egregious, because you are also Mr. EDG. So, of course, they're going to give you the chance, and they're going to believe in you, and they're going to keep giving you extra chances. Like, it just makes sense they would. So, you have made a fool of yourself. You referenced it earlier. It was obviously even the game we highlighted last week. The banger was we had the 2 best teams on paper, BLG and Anyone's Legend played the series. It was as you'd expect, a 2-1. Anyone's Legend did come out on top of it. What do you think of this?
So I mean, I somewhat predicted Anyone's Legend would beat BLG in that series, and the things which okay, what to think of it? It was a very close-knit series the game 1, very one-sided to BLG. It was a massive snowball. I think that Shun had one of the best jungle games I saw of the split. I think that Shun, when he gets ahead of the game, is very, very crucial to BLG winning. I think that Bin had a very good ambassador game. I think that Viper played very well through the on-hit Varus as well. Typically, he's a poke Varus kind of guy. And then we get through the rest of the series where BLG, their late game decision making and their clutch team fights. We said, look, BLG, they're not the best team fighting team in the LPL anymore. And we really saw that in the last 2 games, where in game 2, we saw Knight Azir. Initially, trades went well against Shanks' Yone. Then he died looking for a play-ish on bot side Tribrush, where he taps E, flies into the enemy team, loses his flash trying to escape, and then that allows him to get solo killed after. Game falls apart, but they end up coming back into the game because Anyone's Legend kind of throw around a Baron. BLG restabilize, and then later into it, they try and turn off of a Baron and look for a huge play onto Anyone's Legend. Knight flies into the enemy team, and there's like 3 flashes away from him, and suddenly he dies in the enemy of the middle team, and the game just completely ends. I'm done with the Knight Azir experiments. I've defended it enough. It's just not what I want to see from it. If BLG are going to win stuff, it's not going to be through Knight Azir. Let the enemy team take it, and you take the Ziggs. You're way better at playing that. Just don't look for that Azir pick. I think it's just not working for him. But it's a real shame because actually, I thought that Shun actually got the better of Tarzan individually in the early game in game 2 as well. I think that Viper got pretty far ahead of the game. And then
they could have 2-0'd, yeah.
Yeah, they could have 2-0'd. It came down to just an awful fight around them being in the lead. It was kind of handed over to them because Anyone's Legend had a really bad Baron fight. Hope, even on a Kai'Sa, which he's normally very comfortable on, kind of flew into a combo and died. And then they ended up losing that game through lane game team fighting, and Flandre having a very good Rumble performance too. And we get through into game 3, where this highlights another issue of BLG, where we had Shun Kindred, which is cool. That's nice and all. But the 2 big things I saw was coin flip negative for on Bard, where he was going for very aggressive plays, and he didn't judge the margin for error very correctly. Now,
I had some bullshit plays in this one, but it was gross.
On's Bard was really not great, and this is the flaw of him. Now, the problem is, I think this is just what you have to play into with On. Sometimes you get these games. He will win you more games than he loses you, but this is one where he had a bit of a shocker. This also happened at the same time that Bin picked a lane matchup, the Aurora into the Renekton, which is meant to destroy it. I've seen Keen do that in the LCK. If you're picking Aurora in top lane, you need to get ahead of that lane and just stomp through it. And the problem with Bin in this game was that he ends up not respecting jungle pathing, dying very early on. He did have 1,000 gold lead, and it got nullified basically by first gank of the game by Tarzan on Sejuani in that game 3, going up towards the Renekton Sejuani combo. And then Flandre was just a better team fighter than Bin for like the grand majority of the rest of the game. That's just been the nature of it. In fact, I did kind of like my LPL All Pro, and I actually put Flandre, despite the fact that he has no laning phase. This guy's not been good at the lane at all. I did put him as my best top laner in the league because it doesn't matter what happens to him. If he gets to mid and late game, this guy's just so much better at teamfight impact. And that got me thinking about one of the other flaws about BLG. We talked about On being that kind of the landing tails. One of the other problems is I don't think Bin is as good at getting leads anymore, and I don't think he translates it well into team fights. I think Bin is pretty good at laning still. He's still one of the better ones individually, but realistically, I just don't think that Bin is the guy that translates these slight leads he can get into crushing advantages, which he then wins team fights with. And that has been a big problem for BLG, where, look, Knight wasn't flawless on the Galio this game. I still think he had like 1 or 2 oopsies where he gets caught out by grab fields by Shanks. But I think that Knight still tried his best to try and peel in the team fights as best he could with Viper on the Ezreal. But BLG were just comprehensively out team fought. And they lost a lot in the vision game as well. So On a squishy Barb was just killed on cooldown effectively when he was looking to contain that vision. So AL, they basically won through the areas that we thought they would do, which was about jungle support play, through more strategy, and then through the team fightings later. So BLG, they haven't moved the needle where I think it lies in this matchup.
My problem is I actually just don't even believe that Knight is some like terrible. But whenever I see someone on Reddit like, oh, he's fucking so, you just looked at the box score and saw they lost, dickhead. Like, and the problem is this: he's not in any way good as it. He's just like a bang average. He looks like he's just okay on it. And even worse, mate, it actually looks in some of these games, this one in particular, like he's desperately trying to prove he's really good on it and go for like every fucking hero ultimate you can do, which is like, also, why are we doing that? So my main problem with this is there's 2 obvious angles here. One, why are we forcing it? Like, this is our best player. Why would we ever just be like, but he must play as here? And then secondly, the reason it actually kills me, because I've seen him do this at Worlds play a bunch of times, and also people who only watch Worlds still haven't really seen like how consistently good Knight is. Knight is so famous for having a deep champion pool. If you can think of an Azir counter, he not only plays it, he's fucking sick on it, like in a Kali or something. Like, I don't even know why we need this. It's so... Here's the weirdest part about it, Nymaera. This would have a logic if we were in the standard draft format where you might need to play a comp with Azir. You can only even play one Azir game in a fucking BOX. Like, it's just so, it feels so unnecessary to keep banging our heads against this wall. Just accept it. The guy is unreal, with the raw exception, this is what makes him human, that he's not really good on Azir. Why do we need it, mate? I've seen them. There's plenty of players who are very good players. You fucking take your Zekas and your Creams. They don't ever have to touch a champion like that if they don't want to.
And the real tragedy of Knight is that the champion which he's worst at, and it is the Azir, the champion he's worst at, it just so happens to be the most picked mid laner of all time. It just sucks. Azir is a fairly unique champion, doesn't always have a transferable skill set to other champions. He is amongst the best in the world on pretty much every other champion in the game. He's fantastic at Orianna right now. He's one of the best Syndras to ever touch it. Very good at his melee assassins of Sylas, Akali, Ahri, LeBlanc, all of these champions, you name it, really, really good at them. His Zoe was fantastic back in the day too. This guy plays pretty much everything you want him to. Yep. It's just that the Azir is just the champion which has just eluded him. And the thing which is worrying for me is that if he played lots of this champion and I saw him getting better, I would accept it, because right now it's still domestic. Yes. I'll be like, look, okay, this was a miss, but it'll get better. I think that he was better towards the end of last year than he was now. The Knight Azir is just not good right now, where his early laning is good on the champion. His playmaking is not. And that is both in relation to his team communicating with him about how to playmake and him choosing the plays as well, where he feels that every time he goes for a shuffle, he misjudges where the enemy champion will end up. So he doesn't quite get in range to flick them back. So you can see the angle, but actually just doesn't have that extra 10% range to get out of the play. There are also times where... there's a thing which happens to a lot of Azir players, and it just looks really awkward in pro. If you only have one soldier on the ground, doesn't matter where your cursor is, if you press E, which is your dash button, you will slide towards that soldier. Now, if you put down a soldier to poke, then you just dash towards it into the enemy team. And I've seen Knight do this as a handful of teams where, like, I don't know whether he's trying to WE behind him so he can kind of get out of the play, but he's just ended up falling prey to that a bunch of times where he then loses flash and that throws what should have been an acceptable game state out of the window. And yeah, I just don't see those instincts improving with him. I don't see why we're putting so much time of this into that matchup, because BLG have a lot of problems to sort. I would personally say, look, just go towards his more comfort champions, which is anything else realistically, play towards the counters there. You shouldn't have to play the Azir in the same kind of envelope of time where you need to sort out your team fighting, you need to sort out your just general mid and late game playmaking. You have a number of things you need to hit on the checklist. I don't think Knight needs to be playing Azir to fix the other stuff on there. Just get something on rails, because this team has a lot to sort out.
By the way, what you also said as well, not only is it sadly the most iconic mid lane champion at this point in history, but there's obviously two reasons why. One, because Faker's won 1 billion games on it. And two, he always plays it at Worlds against the LPL and pulls off some epic play. So I even feel like that's even part of it. I know it won't be as big because this is like a domestic game where you're doing it because you want to play the comp. But I even feel like if you're Knight, here's the joke in Nymaera. You know, in the same way as you can always fuck with men by being like, if you're a real man, you do this. It's almost like he believes to be a real GOAT mid laner, you have to be able to play Azir because, mate, he's too horny on this one. Like, what's funny is people also, I've seen shitter fans even go, I need Oriana, so is Oriana's mega. What are you talking about? He's got fucking bonkers Oriana. But this obsession with Azir is just so old, mate, especially because, as I say, I'd also get it if you were like, remember, one of the reasons Faker even sometimes uses Azir in the modern day is as a crutch. It's when this champion pool goes to shit. Yep. That's when you know he's going to be on the Oriana Azir meta. That's even why people joke. That's why Riot's like, better give that a quick cheeky buff before Worlds. Because magically, if there's in the summer we're all on fucking melee champs, it just suddenly comes out for Worlds, doesn't it? Yeah. Right? It's just not necessary, boys. And here's the other reason why. If you were at the Faker Zhao point in your career where it's like, guys, my job is to be carried by you and make some great calls, then cool, pick it for the comp. You're the fucking carry. You're the carry Knight. Like, Pin isn't it anymore, mate. The jungle situation's being that for you. Just bloody pick something you're strong on. Come on, the Syndra's in the meta. There's loads of shit in the meta this guy's stood on.
There are plenty of great players which have that one champion which doesn't work for them. It just so happens that Knight has like one of the most egregious ones. But like Faker is still not a good Aurora and still not a good Yone. Now you think of not last Worlds, but the Worlds before. They were two very meta champions, and that was a problem up until like they ended up figuring out the meta later into the bracket. Chovy, for instance, used to be a bad Oriana and a bad Syndra. He couldn't play those two champions. Of course, he's better at the Oriana now, but that used to hold him back, particularly in some of the earlier days when you had Showmaker on Syndra that would just deck him, and the Oriana was really big there. And back in 2020-21, when D plus Kia was still up there as one of the best teams in the world, and they were kind of in their big era. That's one of the things which held him back. I do think that it's held. It is held against Knight, and rightfully so, just because Knight is the Azir is so important. But it's not like every player has every champion at the wing. I mean, back in the day, it used to be Faker. Back in season 4, one of the things which held him back is that he just wasn't a good Xerath player, and that was back in the era where that was great. Obviously, we've never seen Xerath again like that. And it just so happens that Azir he is the do-it-all champion. He's good laning, good mobility, good team fighting, has playmaking, and I do wonder when they phone it in on that champion, because personally I think there are too many things they have to solve. There's a lot of team play they need to, and I think it really helps when Knight is on a facilitator champion, which is actually comfortable on. I just think they've used too much time on it now. You need to fix so much stuff. You're getting into best of 5s. I don't want to see this important matches. It's clearly not improving at the rate that you need it to.
And it will be so long before we get to the next playoff matches that, like, he's already previewed.
There's Chinese New Year break.
Exactly. So we've got ages. So I think what we do now is let's do a bunch of viewer questions again.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Right, let's do it. Let's go straight into it. So again, if you want to ask a question, if you noticed last episode, we sort of made up for the ones where we had to skip a little bit. We can do a good few now. Mm-hmm. Subscribe to Last Few Nation Discord. There's a channel there. SI questions. Put one in there. If you don't want your name read out, say so, but no one ever seems to invoke that at this point in time. They either want to be roasted or they want the name read out. It's all good. So here are the questions for this one. And again, I will also go back and take some ones from earlier on. So here's an interesting one. Franny Boy says, is there any lost media you personally are interested in getting in your hands? So is there any like series or book series that's out of print, something that you've never been able to get a hold of, or you've always been meaning to find a copy of it? So is there anything like that for you?
Ooh, lost media. I suppose some of the earlier versions of the original, you know how George Lucas kept updating Star Wars? I'd actually really like to, because I think there has been some limited screenings of the original cinematic showing of A New Hope. I would be interested to see that, because I don't think I ever saw that. There might be some of it hanging around, but I think that counts as lost media. That might be one of them. Can't think of crazy amounts of lost media that's on my mind. That maybe some games which then got shut down. Any games which servers that got shut down?
It'd have to be like an MMO or something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there's like again like some of the early 2000s MMOs which I didn't get to play as much of. Maybe that's worth a shout as well. Yeah, maybe like I actually really enjoyed some of the earlier Destiny content, and was that lost content, lost media? Don't think that was. Anyway, yeah, maybe some of the MMOs. There's not a crazy amount which sticks out to my mind.
The problem for this is, if this was like 2005, and you ask me, this would be a bazillion comics that were your limited runs and when like maybe had legal issues, or there'd be some book that was out of print that cost you know £400 on Amazon, and you don't have the money to buy it. The problem is, essentially, if you know where to look,
Yeah.
as the old saying goes, you can find almost any book, even the ones that are out of print. So unfortunately for books and comics and stuff, not really. Actually, that's one thing the internet's amazing for. So I have to agree with you. It'd also have to be a game. Like if I was thinking of one, it'd more be a game where it's like, it'd just be a hassle to either like find it to emulate or to get an old console be an arse on. But it is weird. One of the things that was underrated about like the PlayStation, for example, is there were like 1 billion Japanese RPGs. So there were some ones that I probably can't remember the names of that were banging. Like, and it's lost in this sense. It exists in the world, but I'm never going to go get an old PlayStation, get that game, get the translated version that was sold in America, but not came out the game. I'm just not going to do it, am I? So it's lost in the sense that sadly it's lost because I can't be asked. So sadly we haven't got a great answer for this one, but yes, there is some. There's some out there. Let me see. Right, here's one. Need for Speedo says, in the spirit of the story of you being fed a single potato during a broadcast, do you have any other horror stories of ridiculous conditions in the trenches of esports?
Is that the potato one? Is that your story, the potato one?
Maybe it's Yamato then, because I've never heard that story.
I haven't heard that one.
I assumed he meant you said it, or so maybe Yamato made that story. I don't know.
The potato one, I don't know. Horror conditions on broadcast.
What's the most memorable one?
Okay, well, I can tell you one, which was, I think this would this have been my first day on LEC or second day? This wasn't like, yeah, this was just like a combination of everything going wrong at once. Oh no, there's two. Okay, I'll do the short one first. LPL finals out in Dublin. We had a bit of an inexperienced camera crew there, and we just finished a desk segment, and I'd stood up, and they just changed back the camera angle. Instead of going into game, they changed it onto the desk instead, and I stood up, and they just had a close-up of my crotch just on LPL finals to like 20,000 people. I'm like, what? that was a real like, what the hell have you just done? I think most people have forgotten about that, so now I've just reminded people. So anyway, that's out there somewhere from one of the finals from like 2024 or something like that. I think it was summer 24. God, I can't remember. So that was weird as heck. But in terms of actual weird conditions, this would have been, I think, my first weekend on LEC. So I'd never worked in a studio before, and I was getting used to like working with a telestrator. So there was a lot of new things for me to contend with at the same time. And what happened was, I think this was a Mad Lions game back in like 22 spring. So this is when they had the Rika lineup. Yeah, I remember this now. And there was a play where there was some intricate hex gates being played around and some different stuff like that. So I wanted to telestrate it. I was on desk with Vedi and Dracos. And basically, when you choose a clip to telestrate, if it doesn't upload properly or it doesn't upload in time, there can be some issues with the telestrator. So you can't press play and pause yourself. You have to get the actual operators to do it. So basically, I asked for the clip, and it was the wrong clip. It starts at the wrong time. It's like, hey guys, you're going to have to redo this. And the clock's ticking down, and it's like, okay, well, we can get it in time, but then now we're going to have to press play and pause itself. And I said, okay. And then he said, well, okay, so what's going to happen is they're going to go to the desk first, and then they're going to throw it to you. And then I said, okay, fine. 3, 2, 1. No, Nymaera, you're going. Go. So then I'm unexpectedly goes to me first off of it. I'm like, okay, we're going to break down this telestrator, blah, blah, blah. And then they said, the clip's not working. You're going to have to walk from the telestrator onto the desk. So I'm just sat there and remember this, like, maybe like the second segment I've been on an LEC. And I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to have to just ramble as I go over. Start walking over. And then, you know, Vedi and Dracos take over. And I walk over and there's no chair for me on the desk. So I walk over there. There's no chair at all. So I'm just slowly walking like, someone's going to have to get me a chair. They throw a chair onto the desk onto the same time. So I go onto it and I lean backwards and it's a broken chair and I almost fall out of it because it just leans way too far backwards as well. And we're on the desk and it's like, we've got the clip for you. We're going to play it on the screen behind you. And then I end up just kind of like just shakily going through the clip there too. But for like first introduction in terms of trial by combat, trial by technology, that was one of that was one of the worst ones I could have had for like that only really stands out because it's my first time on LEC. That was pretty bad.
I've got a couple here. So one is going to be a food related one, which is actually a story, but it's 11 years old now and it's a CS one. So I don't think I've ever told it on Something Insight. So assuming you're more of a League crowd or just more of a modern CS fan, you won't have heard the story. When they actually had a major, it was in Cluj-Napoca, which is technically they're two different places. There's Cluj and there's Napoca, but it's like a region. They had a major in Romania in Counter-Strike, which was actually technically DreamHack, but it was run by PGL as like they white labeled it or something. And at this event, for whatever reason, part of it because you're in Eastern Europe, and back then, by the way, Eastern Europe was way fucking darker than it is now. It just wasn't great conditions. So at this event, DreamHack were more known for running big lands. They weren't like ESL where they're like super professional setup. They were more like, hippie vibe and volunteers and stuff. And because it wasn't one of their local, it's in Sweden, which is their home base, they were running it in someone else's country, Romania. They actually managed to fuck up basic logistics like we didn't even have bottled water. And by the way, as far as I know, Romania not a country you drink the water at the tap. If you do so, you can get ill. I think even the locals don't do it. So we were told, like, don't drink water. So for something like the first day and a half, we had no water. So people like Richard Lewis was my desk. Some of these people were going mad on the fucking event. And then I remember, I think it was on day 2 or day 3, there was this mad scenario happened where they hadn't given us any food for like the first 5 hours of the broadcast. And this is back in the days, by the way, where if you were an analyst, you didn't there was no shift. You just do all you start at 9 in the morning and you end at probably like 11 at night and you just do all the games in a row. And if people don't know that sort of a job, even though you're only on camera for like 45 seconds at a time or 2 minutes or whatever, you're still thinking the whole time you're backstage because you think about what you're going to say and what the angles are and what's happening in the match. And sometimes you're even like answering questions to the host who wants to ask some background info. And what do you think of this? And, so you're working on, you need to have food actually. It's literally fuel at that point in time. So then we had a scenario that is actually fucking mental where DreamHack also picked someone to be our like liaison point when me and Richard went backstage. What's going on with the food? Where this person is a guy from Counter-Strike, an old school guy called Hellspawn, a Swedish guy. But let me just say he's a really, really like antisocial person, but I don't think he's aware of that. And so basically this guy made probably the biggest like error I think you could make in that scenario. Because in that scenario, when you're on camera talent, remember, they basically hold you hostage. If they fuck up the event shit, if they ever say anything, by the way, you're going to look really bad to your fans. If someone like that comes to you and says, where's the food? We're hungry and the food hasn't come. No matter what the situation is, here's what you say. You go, sorry about that. I appreciate that you're hungry. That's fucked up. We're going to do our best to get it fixed and it'll be here as soon as possible. If you say all of that, even if it's not true, you at least sort of placate them, you let them vent a little bit. Instead, this guy decided for some bizarre reason to actually tell me to my face, oh yeah, the food hasn't come yet because I was asked an hour ago, who should I prioritize? The people working the desk, as in like the cameras and stuff, or you. And I just told them, get the people who work behind the cameras. And he just said that to our faces. Yeah, it's mental, mate. So you can imagine I just went absolutely fucking mental. Like, fuck you. Who do you think you are? Like, what? So I'm just going to fucking work without food. I said, mate, we didn't have water yesterday. You are aware, like basic, like fucking Geneva Conventions is like food and water. Like you're not even meeting basic human rights. So I know that already triggered me. And then even worse, because at this event, think about this, at the start I've had no water. Then my food slate. And then it's one of those events, because like I said, there's no breaks for analysts back then. You just do the whole day. And if people don't know, when you travel as well, it's very rare you get a good night's sleep anywhere. So it's one of those events where everyone's tired, right? Then, as if to hit the trifecta at this event, later in the event, on the desk area where we were, we had some guy who was behind the camera, and they told us, again, one of those cost-saving measures, oh, the guy who's the cameraman is also your runner, which if you don't know, guys, runner basically means you literally tell someone, run and get me some water or get me like a snack or something, So what happened was we do one of those segments where you get to the end of the segment. It's Counter-Strike as well, by the way. We used to have the problems that you now have in League where you get these massive fills for 20 minutes, etc. And you have to just keep filling until they fix the tech issue. So we're doing all these. You get to the break, it's like, and that guy comes over, right? And I go, can I have some water, please? But here's the thing. I did say, by the way, I'm a like notoriously polite person. I did say please, but I said it like that. Like, can I have some water, please? I'm tired. And this guy, again, I don't know what he's on with Swedes and me, mate. This guy just goes, sure, but do you have to be so nasty when you ask? And I was like, I'm fucking at the end of it. So I just said, you know what, mate? Here's our relationship from now on. Don't talk to me. I'll tell Richard if I want to tell you something. Just bring me whatever I ask for. I'll politely ask for the food. But let's just not, we've obviously gotten off to the wrong floor. I'm not in the
Let's just
fucking
not
mood.
deal with
Yeah,
that.
you just go over there and do the camera. I'll just go over here and do mine. And basically, essentially, because I don't know this guy. I don't want to go mad on this guy. So I'm just going to take it out the equation, right? He took that way too literally because he was way too Swedish. And listen to this. Later in the show, when his job was to tell us stuff, mate, like
Can you just speak to Richard like next to you?
it's worse than that. He was so scared to talk to any of us. Later on, as the camera segment would end, he was holding up like cards with like luncheon 5 written on it. As though, remember, I don't literally mean you can't speak to us. Like, I'm not going to fire you out of a cannon or fire you from the I don't even have that power. I'm just a fucking guy on camera. So that whole event, I remember just thinking like, fuck my life. This is
like,
so
I understand that some people get some reputations like, oh, they're a diva and they're bad to it. That's just this is where some people get incorrect reputations. Like, look, I just don't want to deal with it. Because once you've done, particularly when you're doing the really long show days, like, when you're, I don't know, you've done 4 or 5 days back to back of like 12 hours of prep or whatever. At the end of it, like, realistically, if I know someone is going to grate on me, I'm just not interacting with it. It just makes it easier for everyone.
And you just be on all the time, like you haven't got any energy left, mate. When you come off camera, you just shrivel off like
dude, that is so nuts, though.
Like I say, think of the trifecta. To that guy, I'm a psycho because he doesn't know the fucking 2 stories before that. It's like fucking hell. Yeah, no. I was on one that event, mate.
I haven't had that many bad experiences with people off camera. There's like 1 or 2, but probably not for like podcasts yet. I've let it last a few years until some stuff's like.
Also, by the way, actually, I didn't give you your congratulations. You've now entered the Yamato canon territory. If you look on the screen, there's an overlay with Nymaera on it. Listen, if you actually used to watch Summer Insight back then, that's pretty cool. It's also that art is fucking dope, mate.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, for myself, I mean, you go back about 10 years ago now, I would have been watching the show before I was well involved in esports, stuff like that. So it's a little bit surreal. I have to kind of compartmentalize that a little bit because, I'm Nymaera, the esports kind of worker now rather than someone I kind of effectively grew up on this stuff. But yeah, it's very, very flattering. I don't let it get to my head too much.
Sure. Right, okay, here's a question. We'll just see where you go for this. The dog says, am I an idiot for not liking Christopher Nolan as a director, but still being pretty excited for the new Odyssey because the source material is literally epic? What do you think?
Depends what you value directors for. In fact, I was talking to my partner about this the other day, actually, about how I think you can take issue with Christopher Nolan with the way that he views color and how that affects ambience can really affect some of the he's quite tight in the tones which he sets, right, with that, because he actually tends to go for very cool blue tones. I believe Nolan is colorblind.
Yes, the same thing I do. Yeah, do you want to know the joke? I never noticed this because I have the same thing. So me and him are thinking it looks fine. Right. But it turns out to all of you it looks slightly blue. So I actually learned this recently.
So, for instance, I mean, one of the things which I actually have issues with the Odyssey, and this just comes into things in general, is that there's a thing in Hollywood in general where some things the modern audience don't necessarily view as historically correct. So, for instance, gladiators were used to advertise products in ancient Rome. You will never see that because it just doesn't seem right. There are some names which were about in like medieval England, which sound like they're like Tiffany was a medieval name, but it just doesn't sound, or at least it didn't sound like that in the 1980s and 90s or whatever. So that's just been taken out of medieval representations of things. Now, for Nolan on the Odyssey, because he's not a guy who really prioritizes color, I think it does take away some of what I like about ancient Egypt, which was this like real like flamboyance, but kind of like this ability to like wear your colors on your shield and stuff like that. Where you was, the armor you wore and the shield that you wore were who you are. So in fact, for those of you that know like the tales of like Achilles and stuff, a lot of people would know Achilles by his shield. I believe it was like the colors and the patterns on his shield, stuff like that. And from the initial trailer, I'm sat there like, okay, that could be an issue. Now, in terms of what he's saying is like, am I an idiot for that? No, it's a different retelling. I mean, every era has the same kind of retellings of these great sources of media and writing or whatever. And the Odyssey is one of the most influential pieces of media in all of Western literature. I think the only one which is probably more so is probably something like a religious book like the Bible, right, which has influenced so much of culture. But the Odyssey, it is so core to how much of Western writing just evolved, like in the same way that Journey to the West and the hero's journey in the East was huge for them too. So I mean, I'd obviously be excited for it because the Odyssey is one of those incredibly important cultural touchstones for Western media, at least.
I mean, I'll take the question at face value. I do think there's a chance it can still be an interesting film because of the source material. I can't get into the question because I can't conceive of not liking Christopher Nolan as director. Like
Right,
to
fair.
me, at a minimum, he's just good, isn't he? Surely you
And
don't like hate him or whatever.
for the record, I like him as well. It's just I can
he's
see
mega.
that argument for him. So I'm trying to like decode the answer to that question. Is there
No,
a possible way?
he's in my class of people. There's certain people where I'll just watch every film they make now, mate, whether they're good or bad. I'm in. Right, Big Boy says, what do you think about the anime/manga Monster by Naoki Urasawa? What do you think of that?
I've never seen this one, but this is one which I've heard people talk about it because I think this one's like a 50 episode one about a psychologist, I think it is. It's one of those ones which I've really meant to get around to because it's like it's the thing which I'll say is it's part of a genre which I prefer from anime because a lot of anime that people watch in the West is the stuff which you kind of grow up with and they become like the flavor of the month thing. And a lot of them fall into shonen a lot of the time. So your Dragon Balls, your Naruto's, Jujutsu Kaisen recently, stuff like that. And there's a couple of anime I'll use as an example of where shonen as a genre succeeds and fails. When you have things which are very clear about what they want to be and they kind of just live for the hype aura farming and the hype moments or whatever, they work really well. And you can name all of your big four for that and whatever. However, shonen kind of fails when it has to ask difficult questions, but doesn't set itself out in the genre to answer them correctly. So Tokyo Ghoul got very, very famous, but it answered a lot of questions like, well, how would vampires live in a modern day society? And what are the psychological effects that they would go through? What would their morality be like? And then they just pose the question and they don't do that much to answer it. So shonen for me as a genre kind of has to know what questions it can and can't answer before it goes to it. One of the great things about Monster is I believe it is one of those shows which it does ask those questions and answer it. Obviously, I haven't seen it to confirm that, but that's at least the view which I've heard about that anime.
I think this is certainly one of the better animes. Not my favorite, but it's up there. It's pretty good. Like what I like about this one is it's one of those ones where they don't just throw characters in for no reason. Like they actually try to like flesh out a lot of the characters in the show. It's actually a little bit slower paced as a result. But I also will just say I'm really good at not doing no spoilers. I'll just say with no spoiler, I think the way they treat the main antagonist in this actual anime is very good. Like I think that's another problem. You get a lot of ones where like either the hero's good or the bad guy's bad, but you don't get. I think they've done a good balance this one. I think this is pretty good. So I would say if people have heard about it, it's definitely worth watching. It's not one of those ones that's like, oh,
yeah, I have meant it's one of those ones where it's just on the list and there's a million things out there and it gets delayed. But yeah, I've heard of that one pretty well. Funnily enough, I reckon so for a while I was trying to get Rich, because Rich was starting to watch a few bits of anime and I was trying to find shows for him, but he's just such an anti-anime bloke that even that couldn't get on his radar.
Right, Nadnerb says, what is your favorite British comedy series?
Blackadder. Blackadder's fucking fantastic. I think that's an easy one for me. It's a lot of people know around Rowan Atkinson for his non-speaking role in Mr. Bean, but particularly when it comes through to Blackadder Goes Forth, the way that they kind of judge how to be stupid and then how to turn things on a dime into serious was really, really good. So I think it's Blackadder pretty easily for me, actually. Anything else?
Thing is, I do quite actually like a lot of British comedy. Like I think Peep Show's excellent. It's one of the ones that's really hard to tell Americans to watch because if you explain the premise, they can't sort of get it. But if you watch it, it's really intuitive. Where basically the way it's shot is they have the third person shots, but then they show from inside people's POVs. And the idea is you're literally inside them. So you hear like their thoughts of what they're thinking that the other person doesn't hear, but then you swap into the other person. So it allows like an extra meta layer of humor into it, which is pretty good. It's a pretty fun show.
I'm a big fan of Monty Python and Fawlty Towers. You know, I like surrealist humor. I think that they do that very well. Sometimes it goes a bit kind of into the realm of, okay, you're trying too hard and this isn't actually funny anymore. But big fan of both of them. But then obviously you'd have to choose between the different movies of Monty Python there too, which is a very different kind of experience. But yeah, I'm a big fan of them. I quite a lot of the panel shows are really good. Tell you what, stuff like Would I Lie to You is very good. A lot of the British panel shows, the comedian ones, are very good. So any of the episodes with God, who's that absolute cryptid? There's a guy on Would I Lie to You who just has
Lee, whatever his name is.
No, he's one of the captains. Is that one guy who did his own dentistry? You know, that one bloke? There's one guy on Would I Lie to You who just has the wildest stories. And doing it in a panel.
The one who looks like a homeless guy. I think I know you mean
a little
vaguely.
bit,
He does look like a bit, yeah.
I'm gonna have to like Bob Mortimer. Sorry, my brother's giving me that. It's Bob Mortimer. This is Dibson. All right, your favorite of his, dude. Bob Mortimer. That guy is just not normal. And Taskmaster's great as well. You get people pulled out of some series are different from the others, but Taskmaster seeing the lengths at which comedians will go to try and commit to the bit is very, very funny. So I'd suggest checking out a lot of the different panel shows if you're not as fan of like the more skit based kind of humor.
I will just say in general, I'm a massive fan of all of Chris Morris's comedy shows. So if anyone's ever seen an old show called The Day to Day, he basically just took the exact set and the style of how Channel 4 News works and made a satirical news show where the joke is like during episodes, they do stuff like declare war and then they go to a war room and then they have all that. They use all, but the thing is, because it's literally from the 90s,
I know
the exact setup of what Channel 4 News looks like. That's what also makes it so funny is that they actually sort of commit to the bit and really go all out on, and they do stupid stuff like when they have, the foreign correspondent, it's stuff like, and then he said to the Prime Minister, he didn't like it, but he was going to have to deal with it. And he's like, really? He said that in what language? German? It's like, but what would that be in German? Like, ich nicht and split it. Like, no, that's not it. And like, because it's all the things you wish people would actually do on the news. Like, did he really say that? I mean, even the way you're saying that sounds like someone wrote that line, so it's really good if you like satire, basically. Okay. XL Golly, we're on a film one for this one. Who would you choose to direct a biopic about yourself? So who directs Nymaera the movie?
Oh God, I'm actually not great at directors. That's
Is there a style we're going for?
Oh, I hadn't even thought about the genre biopic. What have I done that's interesting enough for this? I don't know. At that point, I'm gonna need to think about this one.
In your case, it's gonna have to be like, they tried to keep him out of the LEC, but he just won't let it go. Nymaera. Slightly better than initialize, something like that.
Oh God, yeah, I actually don't know about this one. I'm not good at directors. I can think about the genres. That's a pretty good line. Maybe you'd have to be my director. That one, you've got the angle.
Okay, I've got it down.
Yourself.
Who would I pick? You know what? I tell you how I would pick. I would actually pick one of my favorite directors, Paul Thomas Anderson, the guy who did The Master and Magnolia. Because one thing is, first of all, he's really great at like ensemble cast movies. And I think my life wouldn't just be me. You'd have to know the people around me, like Richard Lewis and Monty. There's actually a lot of people in my life that you'd have to know the dynamics to get who I am. But also, if you've ever seen any of his films, he's really good at casting like amazing actors as like he did There Will Be Blood, etc. I would want some fucking goated actor to play me. You'd have all the nuance and all the interesting elements I would like to imagine I have to myself,
Oh, there's one name which is actually just you know what? Danny Boyle might be really interesting. The guy who did did the recent he did the 28 days later, 28 years later. He's really good at diving into like symbolism of like societal, like showing society in very different ways and very kind of extreme ways. I think he'd be really interesting because he seems to actually dig down into the psychological and like the familial kind of connections and stuff too. He'd be quite interesting. I've always quite liked his work.
Okay. Right, wait there a second. What a fucking bad question. I don't know how they come up with some of these questions, by the way. Listen to this one. Fede says, would you rather, this is what I don't get about this one. I don't understand why these two choices are like the options or even what he's thinking. So listen, we've got two options here, Nymaera. Option A, 75,000 euros tax-free in your bank account, no hassle. So you're thinking, okay, where are we going here? Listen to this. I don't even understand why this are the ones of choice, but okay. Option B, you wake up in your own body tomorrow. Nothing has changed, except you have the skills of Prime Trophy and the game knowledge of current day Faker, but you still know zero Korean. That's it's even funnier. It's like I actually don't even I can't even comprehend which is even supposed to be the right one. Like, what is this question?
Okay,
which do you pick?
What the fuck? Okay. I mean, so the funniest thing about this is, I actually think I found a loophole in this. It says you wake up tomorrow. Now, what that means is I have like 3 hours to do whatever the fuck I want, and I'm still going to wake up in my own body tomorrow. So I actually have a free 3.5 hours or whatever to figure out something to do crazy with absolutely no like repercussions physically, at least. So I can get that's one thing. I've noticed the loophole there. I mean, probably the game skills, right?
You have to, surely.
You kind of have to. 75,000 euros. I mean, I would really like that.
He needed to make it like $1 million or something, didn't he? He needed 35K. We're nerds. Of course we pick the Chorley one. Come on.
Yeah, no, I mean, and the game knowledge of Faker. I mean, at that point, no one's ever arguing with anything.
No, I was even thinking the same thing, Nymaera. Here's what he hasn't realised is he's just thinking to play at solo queue. No. We work in the esports industry.
Yeah.
Here's what I would do, Nymaera. I'd even slow play it, like cards close to my chest. I'd just play with like some of the players I know, like upset or something, and I'd just play like a game, and I'd make it sound like they're doing me a favour, letting me play. And then I'd obviously unleash, wouldn't I? I'd fucking smoke all over them. I'd beat like fucking humanoid in lane. Then I'd shot call all the team fights. And at the end, as you say, no pro player who knew me would ever question a fucking thing I said after that, man. Because they don't think I'm some savant secretly into the game, of course.
You could go into coaching. I tell you what, there's some big brain stuff you could do, because obviously...
Oh, yeah, imagine that. You're having an argument with the player, get out the way. You sit down.
Here's how you do it.
That'd be baller.
You could play the Andre Agassi, Boris Becker angle too, where you know so much, but you keep those cards really close to your chest until something really important happens. Where you could go to coach for a team or play for a team, and no one has any prior information on what you do, anything. So you, for a short amount of time, are a complete unknown, and you could potentially just rip through the pro scene. Now, of course, you don't speak any Korean, so you wouldn't be able to do that there. But you might be able to do something pretty incredible, even if it's just as a coach. You could actually be able to be like, oh, yeah, this is what wins you the game. That's what loses you the game. Like, obviously, someone like Faker, we assume he's basically the coach of T1, and they've been pretty damn good at figuring out metas at points like that, too. I think you could hold on to your cards really, really good. Obviously, in this question, you're always for us, we are always choosing that. Now, I'd quite like money. Money's good. Tax-free? Hell yeah, I'd like that right now. The windfall's nice. But the other option would make you bank.
And he should have made it like, if you're going to make it 75k, make it like I only get to be chosen for a week. If I just get that forever, I think I'm taking that one, mate. Why are you even esports if you don't pick that one, by the way? Of all the things to sell out, you're going to sell it for 75k. Right, here's actually a question, Amir. I'll give credit to this guy. There's no award for the best question, but this is actually a banging question that nobody has brought up. Listen to this. It's actually a fucking banger. Danio says, should LCS be doing whatever they can to get Los Ratones into their league in a guest spot for a slot? If any region could do it, it would be NA, since they have the least to worry about in terms of appreciate their fans. That's it, mate. How has no one even thought of that? That's actually, they've already got guest teams, remember? Like, that's the interesting premise. I haven't heard anyone float that before. It's interesting, isn't it?
And before the things came out about LEC this year, remember LR were suggesting, oh, we might go play an NA tier 2 this year if that was how it was going to work. The problem is if you can convince, basically, what can you do to convince this roster together to keep the hype together? Because the momentum has been dulled. It would be pretty fucking baller to see that.
I think so.
I personally, I think you bang on the money. That'd be such a coup. I mean, they'd have to fly out there and whatever. I think you just treat them cushy. I think that would be really good. That's actually, I hadn't considered that angle.
Question, in it? Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
I haven't heard anyone. I've heard a million angles of give them the money back. No one's thought that's actually a pretty cool idea.
Because you've hit it on the head there. They already have partner teams. Like, they already have like the guest teams coming in. So it's not like you're doing something unprecedented to bring them in. Now, the thing is, you have to go through the promotion tournament, right? I mean, as long as you can get them in within the framework which you have, I think you're right. I think you do try and get them in. As long as you can convince the project to stay together, which, of course, watch that space. They, from talking to Yamato the other day, saying that nothing's in place just yet. Pick up the phone, right? Pick up the phone. Make a call.
Right, this guy, Josh Gerling PT, says, this is actually about a question for me. He says, you've previously given some great niche graphic novel recommendations, like Jodorowsky and Knights of the Dinner Table. Are there any other graphic novels or lesser-known storylines from famous graphic novels you've enjoyed? Two things. One, I actually, on my side channel on YouTube called Thorin's Side, did do a video. It was called something like The Joy of Comics. So I actually do mention a bunch of other comics. So, for example, I'm sure if I try to think of one now, I'll even be naming one in there. But I'll give you an example of one. There's actually a banger series which was mainly written by a guy called Peter Milligan, where it's they actually made a TV series, but it's a very different TV series. It's a character he didn't invent that's called the Human Target. There you go. And what this guy does, he doesn't have a superpower. What he is he's essentially like a master of disguise. And the premise goes, if someone's life is threatened, they hire this guy and he dresses up like them so that the assassin targets him instead. And he's got sort of like spy skills, basically. He tries to prevent the assassination. But what's very clever is when Peter Milligan wrote an arc of this, Peter Milligan's whole work is actually all about things like what is identity and who is a person and is how how we present ourselves? Is that who we are, or is that something that we're convincing the world of, or is there like a counterplay? So, for example, when he took this character, he did really fascinating things no one else did before. Everyone else before did the mystery of who's trying to assassinate the person, or the thriller of can you escape it, or will they get the main target? What he did instead with Human Target that was genius was he did things like he'd have it so that once you took on the character and kind of method acted it, sometimes you'd blur into their identity and you'd lose some of yourself, and you'd be, and essentially, I won't do any spoilers, but maybe at some point you even think you are that person and you have to be almost like depro. So I'd say there's a bag of one. It's like it is like a DC series or something, but on Vertigo imprint. It wasn't like a mega famous one though, and I don't think people will have ever read it. So there you go. I'll give you one there. Right. Right, this is for you. Kiku says, what are some of your favorite things to do in Berlin? Any funny Berlin anecdotes to share? So what would you say?
So, well, in winter, it's just a bit shit. In summer, outdoor cinemas are really good here. Outdoor cinemas are really good. In fact, actually, I was speaking about Danny Boyle. I watched 28 Years Later at an outdoor cinema just south of where I am, actually. That was really good. So I'd really suggest them. There's a lot of cool places where you can find a lot of, well, very different movies, obviously in German and in international releases as well. So I think that's good.
By the way, since you watched 28 Years Later,
Yep.
don't you think in the first one, like, I always tell people this, some people didn't like that movie. I think the first half is unbelievable, mate. I won't give any spoilers. The first part where they're just making that trip out is fucking mega compelling, I thought.
I think a lot of people just misunderstand what kind of movies the 28 Days movies are. And I think a lot of people are just expecting a straight up forward action film and stuff like that. I really appreciated a lot of like the very different, like when you've got like those kind of like night vision camera things of like the zombies in the dark, stuff like that. And the very almost non-linear storytelling of some of it. I thought it was fantastic. And I liked the symbology it tried to invoke about, these kind of us versus them and whatever. I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed watching an outdoor cinema as well. Actually, it was a very different experience kind of watching it in like run down brick wall kind of projector onto it. So that's one of my favorite things to do. I mean, most of the time, I'm not going to lie, folks, I do just stay inside, play video games, and stream video games. So I'm not going to be the guy that does like a lot of clubbing and whatever. There's actually decent food around here. If you go to Friedrichshain, there is genuinely the best coffee I've ever had in my life is around here. And I've been to a lot of places. There's a couple of hole-in-the-wall places around here. It's a place called the Blau Burner, which is probably the best coffee I've ever had in my life. So there's a lot of good places to just go out and get like random bits of food. You kind of need to know where you're going. I wouldn't just say walk into a random place off the street, but if you know the right places to go eat, there's some really good places around here. Like, for instance, there's just been a recent trend recently of having Chinese hot pot and Chinese kind of beef noodles. They're really, really good around here too. Yeah, and then there's a couple of really good board game cafes, which I'll occasionally go out to with friends as well. There's a couple around here, which I'll do that. That's typically what I spend my time doing, honestly. Like food, occasional times outside. Like Tiergarten's a really nice place to go walk as well. In fact, tell you what, there was a really cool thing the other day. So the river, the Spree, ended up freezing over for the first time in a very long time. So you could actually go walk on the, I mean, obviously with safety, but you could actually go walk on the frozen river, which was a bit of an event.
I will just say, if you just like takeaways, just look up because Berlin, I think that's the best for these two. Just look up the best currywurst and the best kebab place, and it is really good. It's actually it's one of the better things in Germany. I think actually it's kind of not overrated.
Yeah, Döner's really good. The Döner's really, really good. There's a lot of like Turkish and Lebanese food around, which is really nice. Yeah, and currywurst is kind of like a local kind of comfort food. I mean, currywurst is currywurst. You're not going to get it as much anywhere else, but that's pretty good to go. Yeah, I mean, and then of course there's a lot of the cultural stuff too. So there's a place called Volkspark, which is a really nice place to go walk into as well. There's just like lots of places you can go to, go find bits of the history of the city, which is like museums in cells. So the museum island is really, really good too. Sadly, the Pergamon's shut down, but on Sunday in Berlin, you can go to any of the most of the museums are free. So Sunday's museums are pretty good. Pergamon was shut down, but they actually have like one of the gates of Babylon in there, which is just kind of crazy. So that's just there, and they have like some reconstructed Roman Forum on the other side of that wall too. I mean, I like doing cultural stuff a lot of the time. Volkspark in near. God, what's the station? Again, it's near Friedrichshain because that's close to where I am. There's a place there which is effectively a giant park, which is made out of effectively torn down fortifications from like World War II, and they basically took the concrete and they made it into giant hills, and they kind of reclaimed it. So that's very cool culturally as well.
Right, the last question will actually be a
Mhm.
nerdy league question. So
Right.
Milkman22 says, why are pro teams unwilling to flex Wukong top? There hasn't been a pro playing Wukong top since Armut. Surely the rework from a few years ago to turn him into a viable jungler didn't completely kill him as a top laner, right?
Well, that's all based on matchup for. I mean, part of a lot of it's on matchup, really. You used to play him a lot into Gnar, because Gnar, you could kill him in mini Gnar, especially at level 6, he really struggled. You don't do that well against a lot of the blind pick top laners. Like, you're not going to beat a Cassante, you're not going to beat a Renekton, and if Wukong's not able to consistently all in top lane, really, you really struggle. One of the big things about Wukong that used to work very well for in top lane before was his level 1 was so goddamn strong. You just run at you with E, and you just get the attack speed. His passive would give him a lot of value as well. I think, from memory, because he was played a lot in top lane in 2020. I think that's when he was played a lot top lane, so I remember a lot of people playing it then, and that would have been around Armor as well. I think they nerfed his base stats too much for him to get those all-ins at level 1, and I think at this point, you probably could play him, but you need such a mastery over it to overcome the stats nerf after that point. People would prefer to put that time elsewhere. You're not wrong, though. If you can flex them elsewhere, then obviously that's really good. We've seen people do that with Jace right now. We saw, hell, I mean, Sheo did it with Rumble from top lane into jungle. If you can get an unexpected flex pick, it can get you a draft advantage. So I'm surprised that people haven't used it at all, but I understand why it's not commonly picked in top lane.
There we go. I think we did a pretty good job answering a good amount of questions. Obviously, submit
Yeah.
yours via subscribe to the Last Relation Discord if you want us to answer next week. And we will see you on the next episode of Summoning Insight.